Jenny Casimir. Angela Rojas. Here. Sandra Bradford. Here. Brian Bell.
Here. I'll show you the allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. I know the weather's so bad out there. We've got a lot to get through tonight. I want to anchor some expectations and time. The board does have some business that needs to be taken care of before we begin our 2020 portion of our discussion. We're hoping to get to the input 220 portion by 7:30 or 7:45, just depending on how long the first session of public comment goes. I would ask we structure it so that the first part of public comment, which would be on non-input 220 issues, particularly for some of our friends from offices and business we have on office this evening. And then we've got public comment structured later in the evening for the input 220 issues. Both in the spirit of trying to preserve our time for our important topics, both Sean and I have agreed to no input from us. So we will go into our first public comments on the non-input 220 issues. I remind people when you're public comment, please identify yourself in connection with the school district, what attendance area you're in. Please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes, shorter if possible, so we can give an opportunity for more people to talk. Please keep your comments addressed on board agenda items. I remind everybody public comment is not intended to be a dialogue with the board. If there's any follow-up required, we will ask Dr. Harris to follow up with the individual. And we also ask that we respect the individual privacy of our staff members and students. So the first speaker that is signed up is Betsy Winkler. Come on up here, sit at the table we have set up for the presentation.
So official.
Yeah. You like her to set up?
Okay.
Good evening.
Well, good evening. I'm Betsy Winkler here representing HUF. And obviously, we've been on a very long journey, and I think so we've just begun. But tonight in front of you is a big decision in the eyes of the HUF community, and that is to really approve the ability to go out to bid on a long overdue renovation at HUF. And I will first and foremost just say thank you for all of you for traveling with us on this journey. It has been enlightening and emotional at times, very educating, and really I think the fact that we've gotten here and we have a fantastic solution on the table is a testament to everybody's work. Principal Alves has been amazing, the facilities committee, Greg Soller, Dr. Harris and Brian Bell for coming to our PTO meetings, just really appreciate it. That said, tonight, 2 concepts on the table, C3 and D3. D3 is the preferred concept for the community. It addresses the safety issues, it addresses the ADA compliance issues, and it addresses the staff restroom scenario to the best that we can. And I would ask you to wholeheartedly consider approving sending D3 out to bid tonight. We also want to note that that plan allows to maintain the HUF community as it stands today, encompassing the APSC program, which is just so critical. So thank you for your consideration, and I greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you. The next speaker signed up is Patrick Smith.
Good evening. Hello. I'll start with a request again, a question from the last meeting, which is, from a learning and developmental perspective, why are you making your decisions here tonight? That said, the community has certainly spoken. You started the last meeting off on this discussion, right, within the board, not a discussion with us, but within the board, you started by saying security, pretty sure it's just security, safety, perhaps even, is the number one priority, the number one thing that we're all here to talk about. And no one seemed opposed to that. No one voiced any opposition to that on the topics. So with respect to security, you all serve on the board. You spend a lot of time doing it. I think that you all want our schools to be safe and secure. When Dr. Harris walked into Huff Street for the first time, from what he's told me, and I've heard recounted to others as well, you immediately notice that it is not up to standard. The entryway is below the standard for what you would consider to be acceptable. We've taken some very remedial steps in that direction, and I think you understand that the Huff community doesn't agree with what you've done so far in terms of being enough. There needs to be more. So I think that he, given his experience in other schools and other districts, recognizes the need to improve the safety. From what I've understood, and I think what people in the community have understood, the standard that we're looking for is one that has not a small table, tangible personal property, but real property at the front of the building. A more secure entryway with 2 doors, and I'm sure that that's what you guys are going to vote on tonight. I'm sure of it, because given the incident that we've had in the district this year already, and given your vote for the remedial, we have the early remedial perhaps even, step that you've taken so far, you have to take that next step. D3, as Betsy just said, accomplishes that goal. And so I ask for your consideration and support and vote for that specific plan. If you don't, and something happens, I mean, I don't think anybody in the entire community would feel comfortable at all if something happened. And we could have prevented it by taking action now. Not next month, not the next meeting, not any meeting after that, but now. We had an opportunity, you had an opportunity last year to do the same plan, or very similar, and have that security option at the front of the building. Real property, not tangible personal property. And that's what we need. I have to believe you all recognize that. Wendy's the only parent in Huff right now. The rest of you have this security measure in place at your schools. You're very fortunate for that. Unfortunately, it's taken so much time for this to get to this point, and we just can't wait. We can't wait anymore. I think you all recognize that we need to do this. So please do vote for D3 as an option. I also want to talk about the ADA compliance issue. In conjunction with security in our school, ADA compliance is long overdue. We shouldn't have to rely on one family to push that issue, push that envelope, to show us all that we need ADA compliance. It's been 26 years. I counted with 40 times a week. That's low estimate, 40 times a week, that a student who has a classroom above the stairs will have to take the lift 40 times a week. That's to get in and out of school. That's to go to lunch. That's to go to recess. That's to go to one activity down the hall. 1990 is so long ago. We cannot continue to rely on the grandfather clause. I think that our grandparents, if they're still with us even, if they were here in 1990 and are still with us now, will make a more moral decision, which would be to remove the chair theft That's too long. That's too long. And this board, you, instead of your predecessors, can act on that. And it doesn't need one family. So I'm here to support all families that come. Not even though that's okay. That's okay. I'm only 3 minutes, I know. But these are important issues. These are important issues, right? And I don't, this particular issue, the grant one, I don't think you're giving serious enough consideration to. The teachers that we have to assist there, that's lost time. You have 40 times a week. That's 40 minutes a week over the whole course of the school year. My final point is community input is what should have significant precedence here. We've spoken, the Huff community has spoken time and time again since 2000, from what I understand, probably before that these things need to be remediated, these things need to be addressed. Now's the time to do it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is it Daniel Boykin? Yes. Did I said it right?
You did. So thank you.
It doesn't know what happened.
No. Daniel Boykin, I'm a parent of children at Huff Elementary. I'll try to get back a little bit of that time. Much as Betsy shared, I think the parents at Huff appreciate the board's active involvement in dialogue as well as the teachers and administration at Huff. I think, obviously, Betsy said it very well, the D3 is the preferred option for the Huff community. But I think the other thing I would add as a parent is that the level of engagement and participation and active study, creativity, whether it's sketching, drawings, and things of that nature, demonstrates that the Board of Education is interested in parent involvement. And I think all of us as parents at Huff are going to be parents at the high school and the middle schools. And so I think certainly we do want to have that recommendation, support the PTO, but I also think we want to say we appreciate the extra effort the board and the administration has put into considering this, because I think it does make all of us as parents more active in our community, in our schools. So we appreciate that and appreciate the support for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ron Hinkle. How are you doing tonight?
I'm pretty good. I'm Ron Hinkle, longtime resident and parent of a couple of Barrington graduates. Thank you for that. I'm here tonight to discuss the level of compensation provided by high school custodians and other low-wage workers in our district. Like many Barrington residents, I was surprised by the labor dispute that was beginning last school year. I was also surprised by the very low pay our custodians received. Since that time, I've tried to learn about the situation by attending board committee meetings and by finding out frequent information requests from surrounding districts. I have learned that for several decades, Barrington High School custodial work has been handled through outside contractors. I assume that this must have worked reasonably well for a long time. Unfortunately, in recent years, it seems that the competitive bidding process has led to a race to the bottom that has now arrived at rock bottom. One of the effects of this process has been to lower our custodians' compensation far below that of surrounding communities. I obtained data from Lake Zurich, Streamwood, Elgin, Cherry Grove, Fremont, Hoffman Estates, Palatine, Conant, Dundee Crown, Hampshire, Jacobs, Buffalo Grove, and Rolling Meadows. On average, these districts pay their custodians 30% more than our current contractor pays our high school custodians. And these other districts provide a full range of benefits. I'll also mention that Barrington's average income is 70% higher than the average income of these districts. I've also learned that this rock bottom bidding process has led to inadequate management and supervision of the custodial workforce as well as chronic understaffing. Poor supervision has led to inadequate cleanliness, compromised safety, and has made it necessary for our professional administrative staff to commit significant time to make up the deficiencies in supervision and execution by the contractor. I believe the board and administration understand the current contract must not continue, and I applaud you for recognizing the necessity of improving working conditions and outcomes at our high school. I have listened to a number of committee discussions, and I see that there are many tangible benefits to be realized by raising the standard of performance, either through a much stronger contractor or by directly employing custodians at the high school, as custodians are directly employed at all other District 220 schools. As you evaluate alternatives, I encourage you to look closely at compensation levels for our custodians. We will retain and attract better employees with a wage that is comparable to our surrounding districts. Our high school will be cleaner, our students will be safer. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Salarini Enia? Grove? I'm sure I messed it up big time. How would you say it? Okay, let's move on to the next speaker is Christy Teeter. Christy? Leslie Conway? Mary Krasinski? Is there anybody else who would like to address the board in this first session? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to part one of public comment. And Dr. Harris, you have a quick report.
I do. I would just like to take this opportunity this evening to celebrate the artwork that we have here behind us. Once again, I'd like to commend our art teachers at both the Prairie and Station campuses on the amazing artwork. We also have several pieces that have been displayed in the art show here at Barrington High School and are open to the public on a daily basis. I encourage you to come in and take a look at it. I want to thank especially our extended gifted art teachers and their work with several of our students that have provided some extensive pieces. Those of you that had the opportunity to see them beforehand, I encourage you to take a look before you leave. There's some amazing 3D art as well as the visual arts here behind us. So again, congratulations to our students, always a plus and a wonderful opportunity to display the talents of our kids in the school district. Unless there's any questions, that concludes my report for this evening.
Excellent. Great. Any questions for Brian?
I have one other quick comment. Just to note that Andrew Bradford's son has a piece up here, so I want to, I forgot, yes, right near you, yes.
Any committee reports?
Our policy meets tomorrow morning,
Okay.
so we're going to keep it short. 8 a.m. here at the high school. We'll continue with our discussions around the new product.
Yeah, good.
Online, so actually we should say to the board. We're migrating our policies online to be more transparent with the community and be up and running for the beginning of the next school year. Our plan for the record. So a little search within the policies and find things much more easily than you can today. So stay tuned for more on that.
Any other committee reports?
We had a finance committee at 7:30 following our last board meeting. And we had a lot of good discussions. One of them was the custodial issue, and then we had a few things that we discussed on the agenda.
Okay, any other activity reports?
We have big stuff.
Yeah, I know you're going to talk to the Republic about the board side that you want to update us on. Okay, let's look at this evening's consent agenda. This is done. This evening's consent agenda, we have minutes from open and closed minutes from January 26th, 16. In finance, we have our normal financial reports and activity reports. We have a revised personnel report. We have the memorandum of understanding with the PEA we had discussed, and we have the parameters resolution for action that was carried out by the finance committee. Is there a motion to approve this evening's amended consent agenda? Michelle, be nice to Carrie tonight. She's subbing for Janine, so this is her first time doing this at the board.
Yes. Okay, Chris Geiger,
Yes.
Joe Ruffalo,
Yes.
Wendy Farley,
Yes.
Penny Casimir,
Yes.
Angela Wilcox,
Yes.
Sam Bradford,
Yes.
Brian Bell.
Yes, motion passes, the consent agenda is approved. We have an action item to approve minutes from a previous Board of Education. So this is approving a lot of closed session minutes. I've got 7/24/13, 9/3/13, 9/17/13, 10/1/13, 12/2/13, 12/17/13, 1/14/14, 2/4/14, 2/18/14, 3/10/14, and 3/18/14, all closed session. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Sandra Bradford? Yes. Chris Geiger?
Abstain.
Penny Casimir?
Yes.
Angela Wilcox? Abstain. Joe Ruffalo?
Yes.
Wendy Farley?
Yes.
Brian Bell.
Yes, motion passes. For those that are curious, the members, the board members that abstained because there were minutes from a board before they were on my list. Okay, is there, I'm going to look for, prior to discussion, I'm going to look for a motion to approve the Huff Street School renovation project with one of the options.
I make a motion to, let's not approve 80 for concept T3. Second.
Yeah, I think it was a motion to approve the architectural engineering fees to support the bidding for concept, for layout fees. So, and then we'll talk about it. Sorry, discussion, right? So,
We'll look at it right. Update us.
While Greg is doing that, just to frame this out a little, the diagrams that the board received and the concepts that we're going through, they're not, we don't want you to focus on the room usages per se, because it makes it appear like D3 is removing the ESC, which is not a necessary requirement, which D4 shows. So C3 can also accommodate that extra program, and it's not contingent upon which one we pick, where that program is housed.
So to just expand on that, D3 and D4 in terms of structural layout of the building are the same. And that is what we are approving. We are not approving room utilization or program placement or anything like that at this time. It's specifically building layout and modifications to the building.
And just to be clear, we're just approving the expense to do the AD and then to get the bids.
do a pre-bid engineering that usually happens so that we can get it. And then once we receive the bid, then we decide to build it all at once.
Right, and we'll do that in conjunction with the rest of our projects that we currently have up to date. We'll have to refine the list.
As we talked, our last difference between C3 and D3 was the position of the office relative to the security in front.
Correct, and resource space within the library.
Yeah. Right, with the extra resource.
So, Greg, do you want to?
Sure, just last time we talked about updating the budget estimate. So since our last meeting, we're working up construction to do more detailed takeoff, similar to what we've done before. So they did it more versus just like a square foot cost, really a line item cost estimate. So, and some of that pretty much the same format as you've seen before. So we can look at apples to apples. Just, we can talk about any specific item, but C3, compared to last time, is more expensive. We had a range last time, so it's going to be a little high on the, higher than the range we talked about last time. Concept D3 is coming in a little bit lower than the range we talked about last time. And then for discussion purposes, D4 and D3, cost-wise, they're really essentially identical. If there is some changes of where space are allocated, just imagine relocating some finishes or whatever to that location. So generally, their cost-wise are the same. But I think they did a good job of going through the detail. Again, they're being conservative because we're still not dealing with specific plans. We're still, but just from the knowledge they had from the previous, I think they did a good job of quantifying all the different pieces. And again, like as always, there's a contingency in there of 10%. That is just, again, unknown as we get into this a little further. And our goal, of course, is always to, as we get into the design, there's places we can save money, do things economically, but still give you a quality product. Obviously, we'll continue to do that. Is there any questions on the estimate? Any specifics? I can try to address those.
Yeah, so Greg, I guess just one from my standpoint is, does even the cost estimates sort of bake in a premium for speed? In other words, we're getting kind of late in the season now to be embarking upon a project of this nature. So do you know in terms of Pepper and their ability to get their subs lined up, and this maybe include some sort of premium on this job at this point?
Really, it's been on union, on standard, probably not necessarily overtime or weekend work. We've been in this situation a number of times where we're getting the project started at this point. We realize it's a challenge, but again, I talked to the engineers, I talked to Pepper on Monday, and they're still comfortable that it can be accomplished on time, and everybody's just going to have to hit the ground running here for the next month or so to get this assembled and out there. They're comfortable. They don't really haven't really applied a premium in there, saying the farmer is going to need work overtime. They're still looking at it can be done on regular time.
So one of the things that we discussed at our meeting is the flexibility for the administration and principal to be able to move classrooms around, perhaps use a particular room for multiple purposes, not committing to that at this time. So one of the things that we suggest is, if you look at the schedule of costs here, that we take item C. There's a kindergarten classroom, there's a price attached to it. The difference between a regular classroom and a kindergarten classroom primarily are cubbies and placement and things like that. And so what we would suggest is that we bid that as a regular classroom with the kindergarten stuff as an alternate for us to be able to pick off where we choose. And then if we go down to the alternate bids at the bottom, letter E, this entrance vestibule reconfiguration. If you remember, if you look at Plan 3, you'll notice near the office there's a red dotted line. We talked about this at our last meeting. That cost is related to the space created by that line, as well as some changing to windows, a storefront type entrance as opposed to just cutting in windows and things like that. So what we would like to do is bid that as an alternate as well.
And the alternate for the change in vestibule, that has a significant impact on the security and visibility, which is important at the front entrance, because now we're actually replacing the vestibule doors, putting in new doors, blue glass that's all hardened, that's made to resist any kind of entry. So it does change the dynamic. It gives us opportunity to provide additional windows there for the office visibility, which is important for security of the vestibule and the entryway. So you can see who's coming up the stairs. Otherwise, we just put some windows in to give them some visibility. But this kind of changes the dynamic up there. That's why we thought it'd be a good idea to do it as an alternate, just to see what that actually comes into cost.
So are you saying decided we were going to do the vestibule reconfiguration until the bids come in.
That's correct. We'll have a separate number for that, and then you can see where it comes in. And again, we're hoping the numbers are more favorable too than what's shown here. And that you can also absorb that into your budget. And so we have separate numbers. You make a decision in the vote of bids. And the same goes with kindergarten. We have that as a separate line item, so you can decide to take that or pass on that cost as well.
Is there anybody on the board, the motion was the other option was C. Is there anybody who would like to argue that C3 is the better option?
I don't know if I would argue that. I want to know if we ever had a console of the security aspects of getting in front of the building and being in the center of the building.
Yeah. And Chris had asked that last week, and we did some additional looking, and what's proposed is really what's recommended guideline-wise from a number of agencies, from FEMA on down, that even the idea of having the office up front, it's highly encouraged. Some of the changes we're making, like more visibility, but also the material that we're using for the doors, for the windows, it's really hardening that area so that you have multiple layers of protection and decision-making for actually letting someone come in the building. Those are really matching all the guidelines that are out there right now, and kind of into it. I know I passed on to Dr. Harris some information if they want to share it, but it's pretty much in keeping with what's being recommended. Also last fall I went to a conference that the state of Illinois, like other states, is looking at coming up with some standards that they can, or guidelines. A lot of states have done this over the last few years, and that's something that's they're down the road they're looking at. But again, when it comes back to it, a lot of things that are discussed and they're considering are things we're already incorporating into this. So you're getting what's cutting edge products, and it's really just putting in durable products that stop people's entry or significantly reduce the increased amount of time it takes to physically get in the building. Yeah. Same with that.
So at our community, we did defer to Dr. Harris and ask him if he had a recommendation or preference for him to want to share that.
Sure, and certainly I think it would be into the comments there on security and safety. I think from the very beginning, more members, if you remember, there were three primary issues in both of these addresses. One was the safety and security of the entrance of the building, the ADA access to the washrooms and the staff washroom issue. We also had space issues in the building. So since the last meeting, I've continued to work with Jim Hoff's principal, Linda Klobuchar, several of our teachers in the building, specifically the extended self-contained classroom teachers, talking about what can we do? How can we make room utilization look right? And we landed on the concept of D3 for several reasons. One, it does give us some flexibility within the building to be able to allow some classroom space in the middle of the building. It moves the office to the front of the building. As everyone is aware, that is a standard protocol now in any school that's built. Anything in recent memory, the office is always at the front of the main entrance. And so therefore, this makes it a permanent type of scenario. And if you look at it, that concept fits within that protocol and that guideline. It's clearly the model. D3 or D4 would be the model that I would recommend that we move forward. I do believe the staff there supports that and meets those needs that we talked about from the very beginning. Regardless of how we utilize the rooms, and you see two different examples right here, depending on what happens. We did go back and work with staff and talked about what could we do instructionally within that building to make the space usage more effective. So we've got some ideas on that. We would like to continue to vet that idea. We want to finish getting our kindergarten numbers as well, which has not been finalized at this time before we make a final decision. But D3 or D4, as you see here in your materials, would be an appropriate use of what I would recommend on behalf of the staff.
I think too, I sat down and really gave a lot of public comments that we've heard. And I want to thank the community for coming out. I want to thank the members and alumni of the ESC BSC community that came out. I think that once you think about the advantages that BSC has, it's important to keep that program there. Over and over again, we've heard loud and clear that there are many benefits to having BSC at Huff, and to move them, the program really could be more than any benefit that we were to creating an extra learner at Huff. And I also sat down and went through the funding for capital projects that this District 220 has completed since 2003. It was interesting data. I'm going to pass it around. So if you look at the amount of money that the district has spent on our elementary schools since 2003, Huff is really long overdue for any building renovations. Rose and North Barrington buildings were built new around 1997. Roslyn and Countryside buildings were built new around the year 2000. And so we have 4 elementary schools that have not been rebuilt. Of the 4, Huff's building is the oldest. And I'm not sure exactly when the current building was built, but I do know that it's probably at least 50 years old right now. And so in reviewing the data of what we have spent our capital projects on, I've really spent time looking at the 4 schools that have not been renovated. And it shows that the district has spent $3.6 million at Grove Elementary. We have spent $2.486 million at Sunny Hill, $1.8 million at Lines, and only $834,000 at Huff since 2003. Of the $834,000, $354,000 have been on playground renovations, and $120,000 have been on a roof. So taking all of these amounts out of the total of the Huff renovations of $834,000, it shows that the district has spent a total of $360,000 on Huff street school interior, compared to the $1.86 million to over $12 million at our other elementary schools. So if you break the cost down of the D3 plan down even further, there's been a lot of renovations that we have done as a district in our other elementary schools that are very comparable to what D3 has. And even D3 is a little bit cheaper, I think. So D3 has a cost for restroom renovations at $226,000, and the district has spent $1.88 million renovating restrooms since 2003, including a restroom project at Grove in 2012 totaling $300,000, and again in 2010 totaling $370,000, and in 2009 totaling $30,000, for a grand total of $700,000 just on restrooms at Grove for a 3-year period.
Do you support D3?
I absolutely support D3. I think that the costs are very reasonable and that it's long overdue for our community.
Are we ready to vote? So there's a motion to approve D3. Can I get a roll call vote?
Chris Gagnon. Penny Casimir.
Yes.
Angela Wilcox.
Yes.
Wendy Farley.
Yes.
Joe Ruffalo.
Yes.
Sandra Bradford.
Yes.
Brian Bell.
Yes. Motion passes. So a couple quick things. So Greg, good luck get the bids going, right? We've got a lot of active parents through the Huff community who want to stay actively involved. I keep them apprised of the process as we start opening the bids and all that. So
We'll start a website.
well, we'll keep everybody
Cash and solid, right?
There you go.
Okay.
And I know that regarding some of the creative ideas on the utilization, we would like to understand that a little bit more. We asked you to talk to the affected parents, the program, kindergarten, and all that. At some point, either next week or 2 weeks, if you come back with some thoughts on that, we've got more time to process that.
Great.
And then just to anchor people's expectations in terms of the timeline, how we move forward. It's probably going to take about 8 weeks for the bids to go up and come back. And so we're probably going to be revisiting all of the bids, whether it be on off or all the major projects that we have in April or May.
Thank you, Greg, for all your work together to this point. Thank you, and Joe, and the facilities committee, Wendy, and all our parents. Thank you all for your process, and your help in this process. I know it seems like it's been a long time, but we're rounding the home stretch, and we're almost finished. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll transition into our discussion item on the April 220. I've had many of us on the board thank you all for your correspondence, and I've got to know a lot of my friends and neighbors who knew us. And I've had a lot of old friends that have said, I've never been to a school board meeting, but I'm going to the one on the 16th. So, I'm just curious. Raise your hand if this is the first school board meeting you've ever been to. All right. So, well, we hope this is an enjoyable conversation for us tonight. Again, on behalf of the board, thank everybody who has contributed to the correspondence. We do enjoy hearing from people. I think the funniest comment that I heard was an individual I talked to who referred to this whole idea of the start timers and the different options as one of those 30-second drug commercials on TV where it's 5 seconds of what it is and then 25 seconds on the unintended consequences. This is a complicated topic, it obviously is. And I wanted just to say a couple of things to set it. And while I'm talking, if the April 220 folks prepare to get yourself settled, I just had a couple of slides here that I wanted to go through. In conversations with a lot of people, I think there's a benefit to resetting where we are in the process. Right? It all starts with, actually, in 2009, we did a strategic planning process involving the community members. There were a lot of strategic initiatives that came out of that conversation. One of them was, how can we adjust the start time, right? The board, since 2009, has looked at some stuff among ourselves. We understand that this is a very, very complicated issue with a lot of impacts on really how all of us manage our day-to-day households, our lives, all based on kind of the start time of the school. So we understand. So we put together an Input 220 meeting. We approved what we called the chart, because there was a direction, right? We did this actually about a year ago, right? As you see one of the slides. So I just wanted to go over and highlight a couple of things, right? So this is just talking about the general purpose, right? It is a committee to serve, and I emphasize an advisory role to the 2020 Board of Education. They will be charged, in this case, of order, they're charged in a second. As required, the 220 will recommend changes and provide feedback consistent with the Board of Education direction. So if you go to the next slide, this is what we charge before we put the group together. And you look at the date, okay? It's a year ago tomorrow. Okay? So it was to advise whether Barrington 220 should and could optimize the defined time and configuration of an instructional day based on the student and organizational needs, understanding the system-wide impact on grades pre-K through 12. An important point to make, based on a lot of conversations I've had, this group, right, in the board's direction was never just to change the high school curriculum, right? Because we've done enough homework, the board has to know that sometimes that could be an option and it's a simple option. But oftentimes it involves changing the start times throughout your entire school system, right? So you see that reflected in our instructions in Bureau. I just want to make sure that that's an important point for a lot of people. Let's go back for a second. Defined time and configuration may include the start and end times of the school day, as well as the allocation of instructional time for the school day. Again, the board puts this into the charge, knowing that how a lot of other school districts have tried to do this, and just knowing the math and the challenges, that there may be a need to rethink the instruction. I bring this up because there's a lot of people who feel that some of the creative ideas that have been brought forth, were maybe outside of the scope, right? And I think that for a lot of people, it's fair to say it may have been outside of kind of their understanding of the scope. But in fairness to the group, this was contemplated a year ago when we put the charge. So if you go to the next one. Any recommendations must address how optimizing the time for learning can be achieved, how it can be operational feasible, and including factors, such as but not limited to developmental, academic, financial, contraction, transportation considerations that affect students, staff, and community. We know, right, there's student impact. We also know there's staff, right? As a Barrington community, right, we want to be good employers to our teaching staff. Our teaching staff is incredibly important. They're the heart and soul of what we're doing. So the impact on them is important. And obviously, all the community, not just parents, right? But there are a lot of non-parents who are impacted by some of these decisions because we all know traffic is not an insignificant factor for anyone, right? So it was important. The scope was pretty all-inclusive, right? And objectivity and creativity, obviously, must be here. Now, the next couple of slides talk a little bit about the interaction with the group, right? So the Board of Education, the administration, we value, engage, and impact. This group is designed to leverage the creative and intellectual capital of the community when the board is faced with eventual decisions that may impact all constituents of the school. Obviously, this is a classic case of a project or a challenge that does have that kind of. Now, the group may study and research, hold public forums, provide counsel, and make recommendations as requested by the Board of Education. The final decision on any recommendation rests with the Board of Education, right? When we do the charge or every other planning committee, we don't put the decision into the board always reserves the right to make the decision. Right? Go to the next slide. This is, again, all part of the charge, right? The group will prepare a draft report, include a maximum of 3 proposals with comments and recommendations for presentations to the Board of Education. That's connected, right? Following presentation to the Board of Education of any change, a summary of the accepted proposals will be sent to the media and all parents affected by the recommendations. We'll send something out to all the parents in District 220 with a link to the presentation and all the recommendations. Now, this is an important part of the process, right? Because what we said, this was over a year ago, right? And we wanted to make sure that we were laying out a very deliberate process for approval and review. So, this says for the board, not fewer than 14 days following the initial presentation of changes to the board, a public meeting should be held where the proposals are reviewed for the public, and the public is allowed to make comments to the Board of Education regarding the proposals. The Board of Education will not take any formal action at this time, but merely receive information and comments from the public, right? So what this says, right, is after tonight, right, the board will have to have our kind of decision-making or deliberations on what we think the decision-making process is going forward. We put constraints on it, saying it can't be this meeting, this public hearing, it can't be fewer than 14 days. It could be longer than 14 days. That's what we're going to have to decide. Go to the next one. Right? Final action on any proposed change shall take place no earlier than 14 days following that public meeting at a regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Education. Right? So what that says is, you have to wait at least 14 days to have a public hearing so that we have a chance to digest the recommendations. Right? And then we have to wait at least 14 days or whatever before we can take action. We could make it longer. Right? That's just the shortest period. Right? So that process for us to figure out what we're going to do decision-making going forward, for us it just begins tonight. Okay? Now, the other thing that's important, I wanted to put this in there and highlight very clearly in the charge. The Board of Education has the option to accept, reject, or modify any proposal. I had one woman who was arguing with me saying the Board of Education had no say in this we've already missed our window. And I was trying to explain, no, it's still, we're just beginning our process, but she would have done it. But I am here to tell you, right, it's, the board has the option, when we're here tonight, to accept, reject, or modify any report. And just as kind of a global statement, so everything's clear, right, it's the Board of Education of 7 elected people from your friends and neighbors, right, that have the sole authority to establish all of the operations of the school, right? So we are the ones, for better or worse, that make the final decision in this process. Now, tonight's meeting, and it's fitting for a Board of Education, we're here all here to talk about it, right? So tonight's tone is one of education, right? We're going to get educated on the recommendations of the process of this group of 35 of our friends and neighbors as embarked. It's the first time the board's seen, right? And we're going to have a lot of questions, just trying to get ourselves to understand the process, questions about the recommendations. We will try to get through all of those in the next hour plus. I hope by about 9 o'clock, we'll be able to switch to the public comment. We'll try to open it up for public comment so that people can reflect on what they've heard and some of the questions from the board. I will tell you tonight, our plan is to be out of here by 10 o'clock. Actually, I know we all need to sleep, right? So our goal tonight is to get out of here at 10 o'clock. The board is not going to deliberate tonight on anything we don't have time. We're going to have time to get through it. The board meets again next Tuesday, February 23rd, right? The board, at that meeting, we have 2 big things. We're going to start our meeting at 6 o'clock. We're going to have probably about an hour and a half of budget conversations. We have some budget issues we need to resolve. And then about 7:30 next Tuesday, we will transition into our conversation about input and pick it up from where we end up tonight. Right, so wherever we end the process tonight, we'll try to leave these an hour for public comment, and then we'll pick it up at our meeting at 7:30 on the 23rd. Couple final comments. This is an important conversation that I know our community is wanting to have for a long time. I think even the people I've heard from are all united in saying we got to do something to change, do something for the kids' lives. 7:20 is too early, right? We know it's a complicated system. In this conversation is a community conversation. It is our community conversation, right? And I've already heard from 3 friends who said that they have had arguments with their spouses, right? That have, on this topic, that have ended with them agreeing just never to talk about it, right? So we got to be careful. That's not the way that we have our community conversation, right? We got to keep the tone one that encourages us to continue to have a dialogue and find solutions, right? So I hope that we can get there. I think along this community conversation that we're in the process of having, there's all these things like these recommendations you can agree with or change. But the group of 35 members, of which a lot of them are here tonight, we got some representatives, have done an incredible job, right, volunteering their time and effort to really understand and frame the issues and advance this conversation in a way that we've never had in this community before. And I've been on the board for 12 years, we've had conversations about this, and I'm sure we'll continue to have conversations from tonight going forward. But the conversations and the issues are being framed by this group in a way that is really, really valuable. So tonight, it's my hope that we can just focus and try to understand their logic and their rationale, and we'll start figuring out the process. So, with that, I will turn it over. Okay,
I'm going to introduce our guests and get things rolling. As a superintendent of schools, I also want to take this opportunity to thank the Input 220 Advisory Council. I know many of you are here this evening for your tireless efforts, and I've attended several of the sessions, and I know they have worked diligently as not only parents in the community, as community members, understanding the complex puzzle that exists not only on a daily basis for us inside the organization, but also as community members. As Brian has said, since last May, this group has met. They represented every school in the district. The board worked hard to make sure that representation was there as we went through and selected the members, which brings us to tonight's presentation. So for the past 10 months, the committee has immersed itself in this topic, literally. And in fact, the committee has come to the school district's body of experts on start times, busing schedules, sleep science, natural trends, and education, and what's best for kids. What they have researched and learned from PILE has been conducting countless open meetings since last May, documenting a great deal on our website, and all that information is there that supports what you're going to hear this evening. No doubt, other school districts and communities throughout the Chicago area and the United States will benefit from this work of this committee. Hence, we have our media friends here this evening and know that it is a topic that is of a lot of interest, not only in the Chicago metro area, but also across the country. We have unique challenges in this district. We're a very large geographic district, 72 square miles. We run a lot of buses and have a complex system getting kids to and from school and carrying out the job of educating our kids daily. So I want to personally acknowledge those who are here this evening, and sadly our co-chair, Jennifer Smith, could not be here. She, due to an unexpected passing of a family member over the weekend, I think she traveled to New York and is not able to be here. However, co-chair Paul Sheedy and Dr. June Lee and Christina Anderson of the committee are here this evening to provide the report. They've begun. They also provided you a public wealth of a variety of documents. I think board members who have them in front of you here at your table, so I believe we're going to be referring to those as we go through. I understand they have a brief video that they put together that's going to kick it off, and so let's turn our attention to turn it over to them. Thank you.
Adolescent students today are not getting enough quality sleep. Research proves their natural body rhythms keep them up later at night, and they thrive on sleeping later in the morning. So what happens when we require adolescents to go directly against their natural sleep patterns to be at school as early as 7:20 each morning? Many of these students are sleep deprived, and sleep deprivation means more than just being tired. Not getting enough sleep is connected to depression, lower test scores, mental health issues, and car accidents. Nearly 6,500 students, parents, and staff participated in a community survey regarding school start times. 64% of students and 59% of parents said student sleep is a priority. 90% of students said if given the opportunity for a later school start time, they would use that extra time in the morning to sleep. Research overwhelmingly supports a later school start time for adolescents, and schools across the country are taking note. About 60% of all U.S. high schools now start after 8 a.m. For schools that have made a change to a later start, the benefits are immense. Higher grades and test scores, decreased sports injuries, and improvement in athletic performance, reductions in tardiness, fewer teenage car accidents, and a decline in mental health issues and substance abuse, just to name a few. The Input 220 Advisory Council has been asked to advise the Board of Education whether Barrington 220 should and could optimize the defined time and configuration of an instructional day. This is the third and most complex part of the district's strategic plan to create optimal time for student learning. Changing the school year calendar and implementing kindergarten enrichment have already been accomplished. Input 220's extensive research proves that, yes, a later start time will benefit our students.
Since May 2015, the 35-person Input 220 committee, representing all 12 schools and a variety of stakeholder groups, has held more than 40 meetings to discuss this very complex issue. Because Barrington 220 is a large unit district covering 72 square miles, some unique challenges exist. The multi-tiered bus system is the most intricate and costly component of changing elementary, middle, and high school start times. To keep busing costs stable, there must be a reasonable window of time between each level to allow for bus pickups and drop-offs. Input 220 worked hard to create different scenarios that address these transportation constraints. With the intent to limit the earliest time a student of any age would be picked up by a bus, in light of the current labor agreement, and considering the impact on extracurricular activities and sports, Input 220 recommended that no school start before 8 a.m. or end after 4 p.m. Besides transportation, traffic, and cost considerations, Input 220 also studied the impact changing school start times would have on sports and extracurricular activities throughout the community. Many schools within the same athletic conference as VHF have already moved to a later start, meaning athletic games may shift later in the evening regardless of any change in Barrington 220. Numerous conversations have occurred with local youth, sports, and community organizations to minimize the impact new end times would have on their programs. After weighing these many considerations, Input 220 offers 3 research-based recommendations to the Board of Education for potential school start and end times. These recommended start times provide the optimal learning hours for adolescent students, as supported by recent studies from leading scientific research institutions such as the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the American Sleep Association, Harvard University, and Oxford University. The committee studied 13 different scenarios, including the status quo. 10 of those were eliminated, including the status quo, due to contractual, financial, and logistical constraints, or because they did not align with current medical and mental health research recommendations on adolescent sleep needs. All 3 scenarios align with current research on adolescent sleep science, maintain the general parameters of the current labor contract, preserve the instructional time for grades pre-K through grade 8, and provide more time before school for high school teachers and students to collaborate with each other. Scenario 1 has pre-K through grade 5 schools in session from 8 a.m. to 2:40 p.m., middle schools from 8:50 a.m. to 3:45 p.m., and Barrington High School from 9 a.m. to 3:18 p.m. This option would require the purchase of 48 additional buses at an estimated added annual cost of $841,309 and would adjust instructional time at BHS. Scenario 2 keeps the pre-K through grade 5 start time at 8 a.m. and the middle school start time at 8:50 a.m. The high school would begin at 9 a.m. and students would be dismissed at 3:56 p.m. This option regains some high school instructional time, but requires the purchase of about 50 additional buses at an estimated added annual cost of $845,309. In option 3, pre-K through grade 5 schools also have an 8 a.m. start, and middle schools will begin at 8:50 a.m. This option moves the high school start time to 9:30 a.m. with a dismissal time of 3:48 p.m. This is the lowest cost option because it requires no additional buses. The estimated annual cost of this scenario would be $58,309. This option also has the latest high school start time and adjusts instructional time at BHS. All options presented are in the range of acceptable start times according to current scientific research regarding sleep needs for all age groups and grade levels.
The challenges involved in changing school start times are not unique to Barrington 220. Of the approximately 70 benchmark high schools studied nationwide, the majority experienced increased academic achievement, reduced absenteeism, and improved sleep among students in all grade levels. Input 220 found middle benchmark school that reverted to a pre-8 a.m. start. Input 220 has conducted an inclusive process, having held conversations with numerous community organizations and stakeholder groups, listening to questions and concerns, and adjusting scenarios when necessary. While some of these groups and other constituents have uncertainties, studies of other school districts that have gone through a similar change show the anticipation of these changes is often worse than the reality. Months of research and collaboration by the Input 220 Advisory Council concludes the best way to achieve the higher quality sleep adolescent students need is to change the start times of our schools across all grade levels.
Good evening. In June late, I am wanted for us Input 220 committee members, specifically Mr. Subcommittee. Sure. Is that better? Okay. I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a physician. I have 2 children in the Barrington School District. I have a liberal condition program. One is a senior at high school, one is in the 8th grade at Prairie. I am here to talk about the why. Why is our committee here recommending 3 different scenarios for delaying And the reason is the data is overwhelming, and I'd like to share that with you tonight. In 2014, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended that high schools and middle schools do not start before 8:30 due to health concerns. In 2015, CDC actually backed up the AAP and endorsed their recommendation. Just last week, the American Sleep Association came out with their own recommendation. They stated that middle schools and high schools should not start before 8 p.m. However, they said ideally schools will start after 9 a.m. Now, there's an overwhelming amount of research out there, and it's supported by some major heavyweights out there. And I just wanted to kind of take a look at all of the universities and the medical associations that endorse the late school start. Let's talk about sleep. This is a little complicated, and I'm going to walk you through this. Let's start with the teenagers. This is our high school age group. Now, when you look down here, the dark blue is the recommended length duration. So for teenagers between the ages of 14 and 17 years of age, the American Sleep Foundation recommends that these teenagers receive between 8 and 10 hours of sleep in the evenings. Now the orange is a not recommend. Children should not be receiving less than 7 hours of sleep, and anything excessive of 11 hours is not recommended either. This blue area, light blue area, is maybe appropriate, and the best way to explain that is kind of taking back to math and statistics and looking at a bell curve. The majority of the children are at the center of the bell curve, and that's where our children are. The majority of the children in the middle of the bell curve is at the 8 to 10 hour. There are a small percentage of children on the left side of the curve that only require 7 hours and function very well, and there are a small percentage of children on the right side of the curve that require actually 11 hours of sleep. And the same can be said for middle school age groups. Now this is a little wide for middle school. This actually incorporates very elementary as well, but the idea is here. The average middle schooler should receive between 9 and 11 hours of sleep, and a small percentage may do well between 7 and 8 hours, and a small percentage may actually require 12 hours. Anything outside of that zone is not recommended. Now let's go from left to right. As you can see, as we age, we require less sleep. I think most of us are aware of that already. The reason I mention this is that as our children age, they require less sleep as well. And this may have been the philosophy behind starting high school earlier in the middle schools and elementaries in the past. But what that philosophy did not actually discuss, and what this chart does not disclose, is the sleep phase delay phenomenon that occurs in adolescence after puberty. This is a circadian shift that physiologically occurs in teenagers after puberty and delays their sleep onset time by 1 to 4 hours. This is very well documented. It's a physiological change. There's not much that the teenagers have any control over. Back at the end of 2015, our committee actually had we created a survey for the community, and this is the outcome of the survey. We had over 6,300 respondents, of which 2,300 were students. This is telling us about the students' sleep habits. What time do they go to bed? And we broke this down. The specifics of this was not in the survey results, so we actually had our consultants break this down for us. This is the middle school, high school. Here's the time, between 6 p.m. and 1 p.m. The areas that are colored differently, this is where a majority of the students are at. So majority of the students in the middle school fall asleep after 10 p.m. Majority of the students in high school fall asleep after 10:30 p.m. And actually, that number is quite high. It's about 69% of our students fall asleep after 10:30 p.m. Actually, 48% fall asleep after 11 p.m. And what's interesting here, too, is that you can see the sleep delay phenomenon occurring already as they enter high school. They tend to go to bed later. Their drive to fall asleep comes later during the day. Now let's look at their wake-up time.
As you can see, high school students do start earlier. They start at 7:20. Middle school students start at 7:50. Therefore, our high school students need to wake up earlier. Now, more than 50% of our students wake up before 5:30 at the high school level, and more than 50% of our students wake up before 6 a.m. at the middle school level. So at the high school level, our students are going to bed later and waking up earlier. Let's break this down some more. At the middle school level, 61% of students go to bed at 10 p.m. or later, 53% wake up at 6 a.m. or earlier. At the high school level, 69% of students go to bed at 10:30 or later, 56% wake up at 5:30 or earlier. This averages out for the high school at 7.1 hours. Let's take you back to the United Sleep Foundation's recommendation of 8 to 10 hours for our teenagers. It did say that there's a small minority that might function well with 7 hours, but the majority of our high school students are getting 7.1 hours of sleep. What's even more disturbing about this is that approximately 50% of our students are actually getting less than 7.1 hours. So about 50% of our students are in that orange zone or the not recommend zone. Our high schoolers are sleep deprived. Similarly, middle schoolers average at 8.3 hours, which is less than the recommended 9 to 11 hours of sleep per night. How does sleep deprivation manifest in our children? This is also from our survey. As you can see, almost half of our high schoolers admit to having difficulty staying awake while doing homework. Over a quarter of our middle schoolers say the same. During school day, more than a third of our high schoolers have a hard time staying awake during class, and almost 20% in middle school have a hard time. About a quarter of our high schoolers miss their extracurricular activities because they're too tired from time to time, and 17% in the middle school level. And then 20% at the high school level have overslept and arrived late at school, and 12% at the middle school level. This I thought was pretty astounding. Actually, 1 in 5 high schooler has stayed at home because they are too tired, and 1 in 10 middle schooler has stayed at home because they are too tired. Now, I also wanted to talk about, there's a lot of question about, well, if we delay the school start time, how will our children use that time? And there's actually research on that as well. And what the research has shown is that if you delay the school start time by an hour, then the children actually gain an hour of sleep per day, averaging out to about 5 hours extra sleep a week, which is tremendous. And Christina Anderson will discuss the benefits of a later school starts as it pertains to benchmarking. But I just wanted to add a few things to that as well. There are many benefits of starting school later that are outside of what is on this chart, and I wanted to mention a few of them. As far as emotional outcomes, there's decreased incidence of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations. As far as mental response, there is improved mental acuity, there is improved creativity, and that executive functioning skill, which our children, a lot of our children struggle with, is actually improved with increased sleep time. With that, I will turn the mic over to Christina Anderson, who heads our benchmarking subcommittee. Thanks, Jude. Can you guys hear me?
Can you hear in the back?
I can speak up a little closer if you want.
So I was the chair of the benchmarking subcommittee, and our assignment was to look at other districts locally and across the country in terms of those that looked at the change, did they make the change, what were the results of the change, are there districts locally that are thinking about making the change, and even nationally. And that's been incredibly interesting because that changes on a week-to-week basis, such that I ended up needing to subscribe to Education Week myself, and I am not a teacher. But I want to say on top of literally how many districts across the country are literally discussing this and changing this on a weekly basis. Seattle just, all the public schools in Seattle, so lots of this is evolving as we speak, and that made the job interesting. I wanted to say before I go into just a little short thing on benchmarking that because the public may not know this, all of us who served are A, volunteers, B, C, many of us are parents. D, we knew nothing more or less than the public when we started, and we came to it with the exact same wide array of opinions that the public did. Some people it was crazy and it was stupid and a waste of time. Some people thought it was interesting. Some people were pro, some people were con, but I just wanted everybody to know that there's a wide array of people with a wide array of backgrounds and opinions. And interestingly for me, once those of us on benchmarking delved into and literally read thousands of pages of material from probably closer to 90 school districts, but it's actually in as much depth as we could while doing our mom and dad jobs and our other jobs. Interestingly, we all came to the same conclusion after reaching it, despite coming from different places. And that was meaningful to me, and we did have 2 or 3 teachers on our committee as well at the elementary and high school level. So we all came to the same place, which I want to talk about. Let me give you a tiny, tiny snippet of history to the benchmarking from what I've read, not being an educational historian, so take it with a grain of salt, but this is just what I read. That for a long time in the U.S. in the early 1900s, school starts were more along the lines of what I read was 7:50, 8 for elementary, maybe 8:30 for middle, 9 o'clock for high school. And it was that way for a long time until the 60s and 70s when the educational system started changing. And we started to have busing and consolidation and big school districts, and teachers unions, and all those other things. And districts began to roll the times earlier to deal with all of the financial pressures, busing pressures, teacher and administrative questions, and that's how we moved from what we might have thought as kind of reasonable times that aligned with sort of everybody's natural circadian rhythms, and we moved toward times that were driven by other external factors that weren't optimal for the kids. They were optimal for other things, like busing or teachers or administrators or things like that. And we didn't have sleep science then. What I've read is that all this is maybe since the 90s. One of the earliest districts to change in the country, and down in Minnesota, changed in 96 or so. They were really the leader in the country, but most districts haven't gotten on to the sleep research until pretty recently. So sorry for that long ramble, but I just wanted to give a little background to kind of how we approach this. So one of the overarching things, I guess I should go to the next slide. One of the overarching things that we learned in studying all these districts is that actually the results are almost uniformly favorable, and I'll talk about that more. And the obstacle is primarily fear. Everybody's scared of the change. The parents are nervous about it. Some kids are, some kids aren't. They're not old enough to get scared, as the rest of us are, maybe yet. But the teachers are nervous, administrators are nervous. People are afraid that the change isn't going to work. And every district we spoke to said, that's your biggest obstacle. And if you can get over the fear, usually the transportation, the extracurriculars, the sports, they all adjust and adjust pretty nicely. One of the things that we learned is that most of the districts reported participation in extracurriculars and athletics remained the same or increased, and sports performance, because many of the towns we looked at were serious sports towns, we wanted to find towns that were like ours. Performance by the sports teams improved, injuries were down, and so on, while academic standards we found remained the same or improved. And many districts saw an improvement literally within the first year. Many districts report within the first month. Tardiness is down, absenteeism is down, bullying is down, fighting is down, kids falling asleep in class are down, and parents report their kids are more pleasant to be around. I probably shouldn't do that anymore. So these are the factors that made us feel swayed by the evidence. June touched on them a little bit. I should also point out at least one district documented in the first year a 70% reduction in car accidents involving teens in their town. Some reported 10% reduction, but most towns report an improvement there. So I'm not going to go on much longer, I promise, but as you heard earlier, as the video did a nice job, so I don't want to cover it too much, but most schools are moving now to post 8 a.m., ideally post 8:39. We don't find districts changing back. We do not. We really couldn't find that at all. And we found in terms of the method, and my committee was a little more around the why and the how. We looked at some questions about how, but really we were a little bit more focused on why, and is there a reason to do this at all? Our focus was, should we even do it at all? Because we shouldn't do it at all, and it doesn't matter how other people did it if it's not right for 220. But we did look at how do districts do it, and I Some of the main ways we saw were something that we call a flip or the switch, where you just flip-flop elementary and high school times, which is very common in a district like ours. It's a unit district. Many districts have their elementary going to school at 7:30 and their high school going at 9. As a committee, we did not think that would appeal to the community. So as you've heard in the video, we don't recommend the full flip where elementary goes at 7:30 and high school goes at 9. We think that would be very unpopular, and with the length of our bus rides, just probably not feasible here, not a good idea for lots of reasons. So there's the flip, then there's just moving to high school later, which is tricky in a unit district that has to share buses, starting to central school, middle school and high school at the same time, something like that. Becomes very challenging with buses. And then there's moving all schools to a later time, which is something we considered as well. So, and then finally you go to other creative strategies, which is kind of where we had to go, because another thing we learned is that every town or every district is so unique, and we felt that we confronted very unique problems because of the vast size of our district, the square mileage of it, and the fact that generally speaking, we need to build in enough time, as best we understand it, as lay people and school board members, but it seemed to us that you need to build in enough time between elementary and high school if we're going to keep the same kind of busing system that we have now and cost millions of dollars. We need anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half to run the buses back and forth. Hence, we ended up with the suggestions we ended up with, which I hasten to add are suggestions from us. By no means binding on you guys. Take them, get rid of them, tweak them, but those are the best ones we could come up with. Finally, I was talking about being a nationwide movement, and I referenced Seattle. Many states, their number one ranked high school moved the high school day by half an hour, an hour and a half. The number one ranked high school in Wisconsin, the number one ranked high school in Minnesota, the number one ranked high school in Connecticut. Let's see, Barrington, we have on here because it's funny because it's Barrington, Rhode Island. A very good school in Rhode Island, same thing. Done in Palo Alto, which is pretty famous, and I should point out that I would be remiss in not pointing out the article that some of you may have read in the Atlantic about the suicides in that area. I mention this only to say that there's a very clear correlation and found in all the schools between mental health and teen sleep at the right time of the day. And the incidence of mental health self-reports by students goes down when they start school later. And John felt that that was one way they could address mental health problems in their very, very, very competitive high school. It's bigger for them. And finally, we looked at many more local schools than these. These are just a few. 214 is going to make a change, but to my knowledge, hasn't announced their specific change yet. But I read an article where the superintendent said they were going to make a change. So you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's what they said. Lake Forest is moving by about an hour later. I want to say to 8:45 or 8:50. Stevenson, as we know, is moving, or some of us have read, is moving to a later start and is shortening their school day. There are a lot of additional strategies that I haven't mentioned that the districts have used, things like shortening school day somewhat, or adding a 0-hour period that could be for peak year arts, or some districts use it for classes, some don't. There are a lot of creative things that I feel like I don't have time to get into with you guys right now that could be used to achieve the goals. These are just 3 local districts that have moved in that direction. And I think that's probably more than the amount of time I should be taking for you. So I'm happy to follow up more on this. Thank you.
No, we're going to hold that to the public comment.
Yeah, do we hear me?
Can you hear Zach?
Closer. What we just heard was kind of an overview of how we learned about this issue. First about the medical and health, next about what other communities were saying and how they were able to accomplish it, the challenges that they had. We also spent a lot of time talking with our own community about what are the issues associated with later start times. You see the list here details different stakeholders that we spent more than 8 to 9 months speaking with, meeting with, learning from, talking to. to understand everyone's perspective. We felt it's our duty and our responsibility to our community, and the issue demanded that we made sure that we looked and heard from everyone. You'll also notice here that it's the input from the high school, and the elementary and the middle schools. We wanted to thank them because they provided us direction on what would be possible without impacting education and instruction. And so to the whole community, we thank you. We could not have gotten to where we are today, not all here. Before I do an overview of the options, let me again speak to the different guiding principles that came and developed for our committee. As you've heard many times, based on research, based on what's right, we would recommend a high school or middle school that started before 8:30. Additionally, as we were putting together options, we began to think about, as Christina said, would it be right to start anybody before 8 o'clock? And we came to the conclusion that it wouldn't. We also came to a guiding principle that said we couldn't have a school end after 4. So those were the goalposts from which we had to work within to come up with the options that we had. We started with a large number, whittled them away. One of those that we did eliminate was the current scenario that we have today, for obvious reasons: start times, end times, impact on health. And we could not recommend we continue to do that. Additionally, we have heard from the community that potentially everybody starting at 8:30 would be ideal. It was quickly made impossible at a combination of cost, logistics, contract, traffic, number of reasons. On the website, we have all the different scenarios that we looked at and that we eliminated, along with the reasons why they didn't become recommendations from our committee. As you did here, we do have 2 recommendations that we review with you tonight. This first one, in the video, it actually was number 2, but we thought we'd talk about it first because it kind of sets the table. Our first recommendation, first scenario, starts at the elementary school at 8 o'clock and ends at 2:40. Which puts it in line with the other elementary school we have in the area, St. Anne's. Middle school start at 8:50 and end at 3:45. And the high school, we begin at 9 a.m. and end at 3:56. The committee recommended this option because it aligns with the optimal sleep needs of all our students in all levels. We also recommended it because the progression of the late starts is in sync with the progression of sleep needs that children have as they move through adolescence. Thirdly, we recommended it because, unsurprisingly, it is the low-cost option for starting middle school and high school between 8:30 and 9:30. To implement this option would require an additional 50 buses and an annual increase of over $845,000. Before we talk about scenario 2, the committee has asked for things we'd like to emphasize a point for the board. Both scenarios 2 and 3 come with a shorter high school day. Both options have been developed with input from and vetted by the Barrington High School administration, who fully support the implementation of both. To paraphrase their many conversations with us, I don't want to speak for them, but we'll paraphrase what I've heard. 60 minutes or more of additional sleep a high school student can receive starting a high school day after 8:30 a.m. can have a greater positive effect on the student's overall educational day. again, greater positive effect on the overall day than 6 more minutes of class would have on a student who is sleep deprived. That then summarizes both our feelings on these next 2 options and the position of the high school, which strongly agrees instruction that these next two options would at the very least stay the same, if not become stronger. And as a committee, we fully support our high school and believe in what they can accomplish in the high school day. So option 2, as you'll see, scenario 2. First, the middle school and elementary school start and end times are the same as the previous scenario. In this option, the high school starts at 9 and ends at 3:18 p.m. Our committee recommended this because it aligns with the optimal sleep needs of all of our students. Also because the high school, because our administration strongly agree instruction will stay the same or be improved with this school day. The third reason we recommended this particular scenario, and this earlier end time, the potential would have less of an impact on after school activities. Those are the 3 main reasons why we recommended this option. To implement it, we require 48 additional buses and an additional cost of $855,000. Scenario 3, like the previous 2, as elementary and middle start at the same times and end at the same time. This particular scenario has the high school starting at 8:30 a.m. and ending at 3:48 p.m. The committee recommended this option, obviously because we think it aligns with the optimal sleep needs of all of our students. We support our high school administration, strongly agree instruction will either stay the same or improve with this school day. And the third reason we recommended it is because it comes with no substantial increase in cost. Before we open it up and take questions, as Lieutenant Harris mentioned, my co-chair, Jennifer Smith, is unavailable to be with us tonight. She's worked with us from the very beginning. She's also shared as a brief comment or statement that she'd like Christine to read.
This is a statement that Jen Smith sent today and wanted me to read to the board. Due to the loss of a significant member of our family, I am sadly not able to be in the meeting tonight. I have asked Christina to read this statement in my absence as a representation of my commitment to this committee of outstanding volunteers who put many hours and much care into the work we did, and in support of my co-chair, Paul, who has been an excellent partner in working through this process. I would also like to thank you, the members of the Board of Education, for the opportunity to work with this wonderful group of people and to learn more about our school district and about sleep hygiene. I fully support all the proposed scenarios that we present to you tonight, and I hope that you and the community can be assured that there was comprehensive and exhaustive work done to get to this point. We have sought input from all stakeholder groups in an effort to find the best solutions to address the sleep needs of the children in this community. As a nurse, I defend that the bottom line is a public health issue. Our committee has researched and presented information about the short-term issues related to sleep deprivation, such as anxiety, depression, car accidents, substance abuse, and other risky behavior, and the long-term implications, things like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. And yet the discussion in the community has shifted to a focus of instructional time. I am saddened to hear friends and others in the community recognize the need for the late start, but then note that due to the concern of lost instructional time, they will sacrifice the hours of sleep that our children so desperately need for their physical and psychological health. Based on inaccuracies that have created fear in our community, the current discussion is about concern for classroom minutes and not about instructional time. If we want to consider instructional time, I assert that there already is a loss of instructional time with the current schedule based on the survey results we saw in our own community where more than a third of VHS students report struggling to stay awake in class 105 students are arriving late to school because they overslept, and worse, almost 20% report that they stay home from school because they're tired. Our committee has deliberated on how to address the students' need for more sleep at the front end of the day, while considering the limitations in extending the school day too far back, so that we can allow for family time, extracurricular and other activities, as well as homework. The result is somewhat of a compression of the school day. However, if you find that you are swayed by the concern about instructional time, I will ask you to reframe the discussion and think of it in terms of student engagement. The members of this committee have never once questioned the quality of the teachers and instruction at DHS. And let's not forget that teaching and learning is a two-way process, and we have to recognize the quality of the receiver of the instruction. As a teacher, I contend that if we meet the sleep needs of our children, even if it means that they spend fewer minutes in the classroom, instructional time will actually be enhanced. Again, consideration of the late start proposals that are presented tonight must be rooted in meeting the health needs of our children and our community. Other communities have made similar changes and note that change is difficult. We've heard time and again that this change may be challenging and may be uncomfortable at first. But if the change is for the right reason, it is worth the discomfort. And I can't think of a better reason for this change than the health of the children of this community. And so Jen wanted us to urge you to consider this very seriously, even though it will be difficult and even though there will be fear and worry. But we ask you to very seriously consider the hundreds, if not thousands of hours that we put into reaching the conclusion that a late start really is the right thing for our community, and we know that while we keep working on this, we can find a way to do it.
So that concludes your presentation? Yes. Excellent, thank you, well done. So, at this point, I'll open it up to questions from the board. Okay, an obvious question when you look at your three options, right? It's clear that you've got your comfort level early on elementary and middle school, right? Those times kind of, Stephen, can you just comment on how you got to kind of that, that sequence and got comfortable with the timing in elementary and middle, and why you didn't vary that?
Why we got uncomfortable very early on with elementary and middle.
Yeah, your three options, they say the same.
As we had said earlier, a lot of the medical research supported moving middle school back after 30. Additionally, there was a lot of evidence, empirical evidence that suggested elementary school starting at 8 would have no impact on their sleep needs because they currently go to bed earlier than middle school students. So very quickly, along with the input that we got from the survey, suggested the elementary solution would work and the middle school option of starting after 8:30 would work well. I would say that we did have potential options that would have allowed the high school to maybe start in place of the middle school, but would have moved the middle school up before 8:30. And as a committee, we couldn't support that. We would not give up on the middle school to try to find a fix for us.
But you guys really identified the sleep deficits at high school and middle school. You weren't trying to solve just the high school.
Correct.
And I apologize, I should have said in benchmarking that while not every district moved to middle school, many districts did, and we found significant research both in the sleep arena and in the benchmarking arena for the fact that, and of course, all the statements of all the sleep organizations, that middle school shouldn't start before 8:30. So that drove us as well, the fact that we saw other districts changing and they saw positive results when middle school didn't go before 8:30.
So considering the number of after-school activities ramps up significantly among our high school students, did any of the scenarios, the 10 scenarios that kind of went away, did any of those entertain the idea of perhaps putting the high school in the middle and moving the middle school out so that we could possibly shift the high school, but not necessarily shift it as far backwards as the current proposals all have?
The quick answer is yes. In fact, we played with that scenario a number of ways, and it continued to break because of the 4 o'clock in time. We did ask Parents and Transportation to run a scenario of what it would look like if we tried to move the high school in between, and it ended up having a ticket well over $1 million.
Is that because of the number of buses, or because, I mean, the number of kids that are in the middle school is, it's a little bit lower than the high school, but, not significantly lower. So are we talking about more runs? Is that why?
It's also athletics as well. It was our understanding that Prairie, using BC Park for a lot of their sports during gym time, if they were to get out later, then a lot of the extracurricular sports would not start until Prairie was released, and that would really impact the sports.
I do spend a lot of time on transportation and the tension that's caused by moving these even just 10 or 15 minutes. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for us so everyone can have a greater understanding about that?
Sure.
We're going to call it
Every 15 minutes, actually every 5 to 10 minutes mattered. There was a scenario that we had in the past that is 9:15 for a start, and it had a ticket of well over $600,000. Every scenario, it was not only dominoes, but also Rubik's Cube. Everything leaned on everything else. But I can tell you, if you look at the options, we tried them all, we tried to fit them all in, and American Transportation ran numerous scenarios for us. The data that they had was extensive, and they helped guide us on why having buses out at the elementary at a particular time impact when you can pick up middle school, at which point when it might impact when you can get to the high school. All of those scenarios are detailed. Our transportation team, like the others, educated us on what was possible, and continued to go back to American Transportation and say, what about this? What about this? In fact, we drove them nuts with what about this? And, if we would like to go into more detail at a later date, we could bring that committee in and they can walk you through all of the different scenarios and why they would either break, not meet the times, bump up against the 4 o'clock contractual issue, or start before.
There's also an issue that the closer we push any schools together, if we don't keep a certain amount of time between schools to make best utilization of our buses. So every 10 or 15 minutes we push together means we add more buses because the buses can't make it back from where they were to the next run to the next school. And eventually we run out of land to park the buses on in downtown Barrington, which I think we're actually out of now, if I'm not mistaken, or close. You guys know about that when we do when I told it. It's part of the land utilization issue as well. So every plan that we looked at that added more and more buses, it creates multiple problems in terms of bus availability. Buses have to be built that aren't easily obtained on the open market. Where do you park the buses? Where do the buses cost? So some of these plans became more and more logistically challenging, and I think Jeff might have some insight into that in the past.
So we benefited from many conversations with the transportation company, and we're fortunate to have some logistical experts and statisticians who are a part of this committee. And the simple rule of thumb that we learned in all of these meetings is that to maintain our current economic structure of our busing system of contract, we have to have roughly an hour-and-a-half separation at minimum between the start of our earliest school and the start of our latest school. So with the committee's guiding principle that no school should start earlier than 8 a.m., then that automatically meant that some school at some level would ideally have to start at 9:30 in order to maintain the current busing structure.
Other questions?
Can you talk a little bit more about the 0 hour? I've heard a little bit about it. I've heard that it started at 8:30. Does 0 hour come into play on scenario 1, 2, 3? What does that look like? Is that a directive? Is that what is it?
Well, can I? We'll go ahead and give a quick answer. I would suggest that we get a more detailed discussion of that whole thing in our next meeting.
I ask this because there's been a lot of people approach me and talk about 9:30 is just way too late in their mind. And so I said, well, I think there's this 0 hour thing out there that your child could start high school at 8:30 as long as you provide that transportation. And if that transportation is provided, your high schooler would then get out of school at 2:48. So that you would be shifting, the day from 8:30 to 2:48. I don't know if that's right.
So how the high school may configure its day, the instructional time within the day is not a part of the 220's recommendations. They're simply looking at the start and end times. But the high school leadership team has been a regular participant in their conversations. And in fact, some of the scenarios that Input 220 has arrived at, I think were probably inspired by the high school in saying that they can make these scenarios work and they fully support them. But what happens within the high school day is probably something for a later conversation because there are many intricacies to that. Regarding 0 hour, what we'll say simply is that yes, some of the scenarios do provide for that option. There's a lot of focus on the 9:30 start time, but with a 0 hour added to that, students would have the option in some cases of beginning school as early as 8:30 a.m. And in fact, if you look at the third scenario that has a marginal cost, we say marginal, but the lowest cost of $58,000 in annual added expense. That $58,000 is almost entirely devoted to providing transportation related to 0 hour, if that is something that is eventually accepted by the school district and by the Board of Education. Because we realize that we would not want to offer 0 hour at the high school without students being able to avail themselves of that, especially if they have no transportation. So that $58,000 is mostly the cost of providing bus transportation in some forms so students could get to the school earlier for 0 hour.
Okay, 0 hour would start scenario number 3 at 8:30.
Correct, because that scenario starting at 9:30 provides a little bit more flexibility before the beginning of the official school day for something like 0 hour to be introduced.
If we wanted to have a more detailed conversation at our next meeting, would you guys be prepared to do that?
Yes. Mr. McWilliams and several of the staff will certainly be prepared to discuss that.
From a benchmarking perspective, New Trier and some other districts do utilize 0 hours, and we thought that there's many different ways to do it.
So that 0 hours will look like a question change the intake here, or
Both. It depends on the student. That they would want to get defer to me, and they would explain it. Some kids in school early now. Some juniors and seniors, that's the way our curves get, right, John? And so it really would depend on the student and the situation, so it's possible.
Other questions?
So I understand that the research that you conducted, you came up with an area of time that you found to be the optimal time for both middle schoolers and high schoolers to start their school day. In any of those 10 scenarios that, I'm sure you eliminated them for a very good reason, but I'm just curious, were there any that maybe pushed that envelope a bit, so it didn't fall squarely within the recommendations, but it's something that would still provide a benefit, you would consider, or maybe as a board that we should consider looking at as well?
I'll take that one. We felt very strongly after conducting all of our research that anything before 8:30 would be futile for us to pursue. The evidence out there is so overwhelming that it became one of the major goals of the Input 220 to start middle school and high school after 8:30. So we did not really evaluate fully options starting before 8:30.
We also point out that
moving the middle school up a little bit, and it would have a marginal impact, as Jeff said. It's the hour and a half between the start of the first one and the start of the last one. So, moving, for example, I know the tables we looked at, like 8:15 start for middle school was, and no dramatic impact because unless it would be significant cost, still end up having to have a 9:30 start at one school.
So, a question that, and I've had a chance to sit through a lot of the meetings, and I've been impressed with your dialogue, and I've gotten glimpses of what I think the answer to this question might be, but I think it's kind of in the back of most of our residents' heads, right? Your recommendations are heavily influenced on your belief around how long the kids need to sleep and when they need to wake up, right? And sometimes, right, as parents, our first reaction is, great, they can go to bed early, right? And I know that you guys had some conversations about that, and the physiological science behind it. So I'm wondering if you could just comment, right, if I just say, look, you don't need to say start time, as a parent, just gotta make up to go to bed early.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So after puberty, this sleep delay phase, the sleep phase delay occurs. It's a well-documented phenomenon. The circadian rhythm shifts an hour to 4 hours for teenagers and adolescents. What does that mean? You put a 16-year-old in bed at 9 o'clock, they cannot fall asleep. You can give them the best bedtime hygiene, it doesn't work. It's a physiological image on the clock, they cannot fall asleep. Now, that's not to say there aren't outliers out there. There may be some, and the survey did show one student who fell asleep at 6 p.m. But that's truly an outlier, and that will be something that will be very difficult to enforce because it's not within the mechanics of a teenager's body. And I will say that we've had multiple parents come and speak to us or call us or email us, and I don't have high school, but they have, I can't tell you the number of people virtually in tears saying, I put my freshman, junior, whatever, I tell her, take your device away, you're going to bed, the lights are going off at 9:30 or 10, if you're getting up at 5:30, and the child is begging the parent for drugs. The child is saying to the parent, can you give me some minutes, can you give me whatever, I can't fall asleep, I want to go to sleep, but I can't go to sleep. And I kid you not, how many parents have called us and said, please do something because my kid wants to go to sleep and he or she can't. Now that may or may not be true for the child that's doing 5 hours of sports, the other day about to do 2 hours in the morning, 3 after school, he or she might be tired enough, I don't know, but we didn't have calls from people saying that. We had calls from people saying, my child's literally begging for medication and I'm not going to drug my kid to go to sleep. So anecdotally, that's what we're doing.
We also do believe in the theory that the majority of our community parents don't care about this issue now, and that we suddenly start to worry about it if times will change. We think they've been, I know they've been aware of this issue for a long time and have done what they can to try to improve the sleep habits for their children.
Before we ask a question, can I ask someone to go get the public comment sheet?
Anybody that has a kid that's been out at a bus stop at 6 o'clock in the morning realizes that 7:20 is helpful. And to send my daughter out there when 80% of those days it was dark out while she was standing out there was kind of tough for me. And we're talking about, just maybe shifting this paradigm a little bit. My question is going to be a challenge really to the group, and I don't even know how the board feels about this, but perhaps, we need to rethink that one of the goalposts, the 8:30 goalpost, and look at the high school giving the benefit of 40 minutes, or, so 8 o'clock or 8:15 is where it starts, and then we look. I know that you guys probably ran some of these scenarios. There's, I wish that we had the time to go through some of the broken ones, because I can tell you that as a high school teacher, as I look at, and I understand, I taught 24 years I've seen plenty of kids sleeping in front of me. And I'm not bragging about that. I'm talking about it as a serious issue. The reality is, though, there are concerns that go beyond this, so that, when we try to kind of encapsulate all of the community values, how can we find a happy compromise that would allow us to make a shift that would be supported not only by our community, but also by our school community, the culture within the school, all the teachers in that school, all of the coaches, the students, everybody. And so I look at those. I mean, there's no question built into that. It's more of a challenge in our thinking, because you guys came with the ideal approach that really tackled the serious problem that I can recognize. But, we're hearing a lot, we're going to hear a lot of voices, but my biggest concern is one where the entire group of people affected would be the happiest. And it might involve not starting at the ideal time soon.
Penny, the last question, and then we're going to transition to public comment.
One of the things I've heard a lot of concerns about is organizations and activities outside of the normal school day, and how a change like this might affect those things. So, Park District, I know you have a lengthy list of organizations that you've been interacting with. Can you share with everyone the reaction you have from them and where their concerns lie?
Yeah, we met with them all. We heard about concerns about how late in the day some of these extracurriculars start. We also heard that a lot of them already start later in the day, and that moving the end time back would have an impact, but it would have an impact more on the direct school extracurricular activities as opposed to the non-school related extracurricular activity, which would typically be parent-led and starts at the 5:30 or 6 o'clock time. We did collect all of that information. We do know that the overriding messages to us was, if you're going to come to change, let's do it quickly so that we can start adjusting our schedules and start working on field times and making sure that everything works. I do know the middle school also said that the times that we were at the edge about the work for the middle schools, and that all the other middle schools are changing as well. And there's already been requests about having middle school activities start out for sure. So they were supportive. They shared that it's right at the edge of the work in the elementary time. Starting early or ending earlier, they would promote after-school activities which currently happen before school.
In fact, we saw in benchmarks increased elementary school participation in districts that went to 7:30, 7:50, or 8. More kids, of course, took the after-school clubs, more culture creative. There were more elementary sports. Then the kids could stay longer in school and do those sports when they're not getting out of formula. We also saw a strategy that a lot of districts used where feasible to make that last period of the day for the high school students that do sports, be their PE period, and then they can leave early to go to away games as needed. That's effective in a number of districts.
Well, just we're going to let Sandra ask the last question.
All right. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit more about the times, the minutes per hour in the high school. Two of the proposals that they together are actually in those hours. So can you just elaborate a little bit more on that? What's the state requirement, and what is the benchmark or the neighboring communities and the hours of the minutes per hour?
Again, I'll try to speak for the high school, but we anticipate that will be a more extensive conversation later in this process. A lot has been made about the adjustment from 49 classroom minutes to potentially 47 or 43 classroom minutes at the high school. Their position once more is that it provides them the opportunity to be more efficient with their instructional periods. It is not out of line with many of the high schools that are in the BHS peer group. It was mentioned earlier that New Trier High School, for example, for many years has had 40-minute class periods. And nobody would argue with New Trier year's success. Now granted, New Trier offers a 9-period day. Evanston High School, which also has 42-minute class periods, also offers a 9-period day. But a 9-period day simply provides more options for students. It doesn't increase the amount of instructional time per subject. So if top-tier high schools that are actually above Barrington High School in the rankings, such as New Trier and Evanston, if they can teach with 40 and 42-minute periods, our high school is bolstered to believe that they can as well, and that they can be equally effective. So that's something that we'll discuss at another time, because it really speaks more to the configuration within the high school day. But they believe that it can work. They've come up with some creative options that might be considered in subsequent years. And I know they look forward to having that conversation. Let me add one other thing too. Throughout the Chicago area, the average for an instructional period for an 8-period day is 44 minutes. Nationwide, there was actually a study done by James Madison University in 2009, where they looked at more than 500 of the highest performing high schools in the country. Those that had an 8-period day, their average classroom minutes were 43 minutes for an 8-period day. So again, what is being proposed by the high school in response to this, or perhaps some of these scenarios that are in response to conversations with the high school, very much in keeping with best practices not only in the Chicago area, but also nationwide.
One final comment on that from the committee. We will not be speaking on behalf, but obviously we did hear from high school on all of those issues. And it was a very impressive presentation. Their vision, okay, was something that we could obviously support. They have reasons behind everything that they intend to do. They have examples, and we heard those. So we do encourage the next conversation to be with the high school and have them go into those details about what they think they're going to be able to bring. I can tell you what they told us is nothing is going away. We've heard a lot about reduced choice, classes going away, AP. We were in the presentation. We were not able to read the options that included that. A high school option, we fully support what they told us they can do, and we support what they've done in the past. We're going to try to give them students that are well rested to get off the bus and walk in school. They told us they can take it from there.
Thank you. Before we transition to public comment, will you guys be able to join us next week, or other members of your group, if we've got further questions for you? We'll take this up again next week. I will send you, we'd love to have at least some set of the group that could be here, so that as the board is beginning the process next Tuesday, if we've got questions, we can still have somebody to ask questions to. That would be helpful. Also, I know that there are a number of you 220 committee members sitting in attendance. Can you guys all stand up so we can thank you for the work that you've done so far? Okay, so, and I also, I'm about to say something before I do, I want to make sure, I thought I heard at one point the intent of the committee was to publish an FAQ kind of document. Is that in the works? Okay. So, as we open up public comment, I imagine there's a wide range of a lot of still issues that we need to process, right? So, feel free to say whatever you want to say. That's public comment. I will tell you, I think the board in particular would be interested to hear, if there's options you like, options you don't like, or issues you think that we should be, considering as we begin to process these options, and also any other thoughts that you have for the board on the process that we'll begin to have some discussion on next Tuesday. But if you've got an idea on how the board should kind of go about our decision-making process on these issues, we're certainly open to that. So we have 10 people signed up. As I said before, I asked you to try to keep your comments to the 2 to 3 minute range so we can get as many people in as possible. their FTQ doc. Or you're always willing after the meeting to order one of them and try to answer questions. So keep your comments to 3 minutes. I assume that all the comments right now are going to be on the Equal 220 agenda item. And we'll try to get in as many as we can. So we have I think 9 people signed up, and then after that, it'll be open mic time. The first person who signed up is David Alterman. And we'll ask you to come up here to the mic, and then I'll give you the on-deck speakers, Patrick Smith. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is David Holterman. I'm here in my capacity as a member of a new parent group called Barrington United for Education. Earlier today, we submitted a letter to each of you on the Board of Education, as well as to Dr. Harris. We also submitted a petition with, at last count, over 275 signatures, asking the board to slow down and look at a process and look at options that do not impact and cut instructional time, that do not impact and cut curricular offerings, and do not impact and cut extracurricular opportunities. I'm not here to dispute why, okay? There's a very good presentation that gets at the science of why. The questions really are regarding how. Earlier we heard the committee talk about what it called the fear factor. I think that was portrayed and presented in somewhat patronizing fashion. What I would say is that I can speak for myself, I can speak for many people I have talked to. There's a great deal of apprehension about sort of the empty details about how this is going to be implemented. And this is really an implementation issue. It is the last 25 seconds of that 30-second prescription commercial. The issue is how to do it. We also just heard that at the high school level, the plans for how the day is going to could be reconfigured. Those details are not available. The input committee apparently did not consider that to be part of its charge. So we're left with questions. We're left with that uncertainty. And I do not believe that this take-it-on-faith approach that taking an hour out of the high school day, that reducing instructional time by 43 minutes is something that can just be made up for through efficiencies and better teaching methods. In some ways that discredits the teaching methods that are currently in place at the high school level, which I have a hard time accepting. Let me speak for a few minutes as a parent. I'm a 17-year resident of Barrington. My 2 children have been in school here starting 8 years ago. They're both at station. One's a 6th grader, one's an 8th grader. I'm very proud of District 220. I've been very impressed with how they've been educated, the quality and the care of the education that they've received, and I have been looking forward to their entry into Barrington High School in a few years. Well, a few years has moved along, and we're on the doorstep. My son will be entering high school next year. I never imagined that I would have to come here before the board to beg you not to cut educational time, not to take actions that will reduce curricular options, and not to take actions that would impact extracurricular options. That is certainly not the vision that my family has had for educating our children, and it's really quite a shock to be considering that. 7 years ago, the Board of Education adopted a strategic plan. We heard about one aspect of that earlier. That plan also sought to increase instructional time and increase time for learning within the school day. It also considered options and talked about options such as increasing the length of the school year. Here we are, some years later, 7 years later, looking at doing exactly the opposite, having a compressed school day. I don't understand that shift. I understand the why behind the sleep signs and later start. I don't understand the U-turn that has us looking at a shorter school day. This is a surprise, and I think to some people it is in fact a betrayal of what they have expected from this district and specifically from the high school. The options that are presented, I believe, are too extreme. Barrington United for Education believes are too extreme. They compress the school day. What it will mean is that children who are very interested in education, who who want to have the maximum number of offerings are going to be compressed. Something is going to be left out. Something will not fit into that schedule. I also believe that it is a mistake to cut instructional time for no clear reason. I believe the school board, and Barrington United for Education believes the school board must come up with some balanced options that will not have these negative impacts. There was a discussion earlier, and I believe Mr. Ruffalo asked a question which we have discussed, which is why has this panel, why has the committee not looked at options that would start the high school before 8:30 a.m. Again, the dispute, the question is not with the why, it's with the how. And we think that there needs to be flexibility. We think that approaches that prioritize sleep above all these other factors, above extracurriculars, above parent work schedules, above student work schedules, above instructional time. We do not believe those are appropriate. I think it would be appropriate to consider options that would move the high school start time back, but not back as far as is proposed right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Patrick Smith. On deck is Captain Lee.
I started my time already. It's going to be under 3 minutes, but this bar is coming out.
Okay.
Thank you, Patty, for asking Brian earlier to express the learning development reasons to support the vote that you had earlier tonight. And Wendy, thank you for your leadership for health regulations. I really appreciate it. Brian, thank you for your comments. It's exactly what I was hoping we would get. I appreciate that. It's more to get out of the record here. And I gave the thanks as well. So thank you for that. So I have a second grader. My second grader, when last year we was in first grade, there was a high school senior across the street. He had a really loud muffler. At 7 o'clock in the morning, he'd leave to go to high school, and he'd wake my son up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Starting at 8 o'clock right now for elementary school, the science isn't there. With all due respect, please present it better to us. The science is not there. All the dollars, most of the dollars that have been spent by Oxford, by AMA, Psychology Association, the dollars that have been spent are on middle school and high school. The science isn't there for elementary school. The article that I sent you a link to earlier today, it cited some of the language from, it indicates that in a community like ours, with affluent people, the children in our community, the study shows, are going to be worse. Sure, there are going to be some that do better. It can work in some places, right? You even said there's no one size fits all. And I just don't, the studies that are out there don't tell us the same thing about elementary school that they tell us about high school and middle school. So please, please, please take the time. Let's do some more research, or at least communicate more to us as elementary school parents. Again, my son was going to bed at 7 o'clock, and he was getting up at 7 o'clock when he was awoken by a neighbor's very loud muffler. The science is there for high school. Oh, please, please, please make high school start later. Please make high school start later. High school parents, you guys can talk about what you want to talk about. Please do that. But car crashes are the things that kill high school kids. Car crashes are, I'm not calling them accidents, I'm calling them crashes. The crashes are the things that impact their lives. That alone, please, please, please make them start later. It will save lives. But the elementary science isn't there. It's not. 8 o'clock, you're doing it for logistical reasons. I mean, that's it. It's logistical reasons, and I don't support that. The rest of them I do support.
Thank you. So we have Kathy Lehman. On deck is Haley Iceworth.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm going to restrict my comments to AP classes because many other people this evening as a start for anything else I have to say will be copied, and I'm sure everybody would like to move on with the evening. One of the things I wanted to start with was I had spoken before the board on one previous occasion, and that was to urge you to look at always about how we go about that. And one of the things that I'd like you to consider as you make your decision is the effect on some of those students who are in, it's a specific group, but it's a growing group, and those are the AP students in high school. Because more and more students are moving into AP classes, and it's not just true for our district, that's true for many districts. And what the reason for that is that the curriculum has been determined that it's valuable. Even if those students don't end up scoring 4s or 3s or 4s or 5s on the AP test, it's been determined that just going through that class is valuable. So I think as we move forward, we need to consider putting those students in those AP classes. For example, everybody's talking about STEM classes. Our science classes at high school now are 2 periods. And one of the things that I think has been most valuable in this experience in AP classes is our teachers don't just teach to the test. And that's been one of the criticisms of AP classes. In fact, that's when Dartmouth has stopped taking AP classes after a decade-long study, is they determined that kids were not getting the education of the class as much as they were learning how to take the AP test. Our teachers don't do that. Our teachers instead make sure that the kids understand what they're learning. We've spoken with some of the AP teachers in high school. They talk about the synthesis of information, the discussion part, all of those things that Barrington has and other schools don't. So I think the question comes down to not can the high school do it within that shorter period? I have no doubt they can. And in fact, what some of the folks from high school told us is that when they were presented with the question of can you do this, sure we can. I think what we'd like to add, as parents, what we'd like to have is ask what should we? And should we look at those extra minutes? And the other thing is when we look at an AP student, whether that student is in 1 AP class or 5, the question is there is an AP test at the end, there is a hard stop. And so at what point do the students get to learn all of that additional information? Is that independent learning? Is that paying tutor? So there's an added cost. What about the pressures on those students? And I think that's something that we need to really think about, because one of the reasons I spoke in favor of Good Start way back a year and a half ago was that I saw the value of taking some of the pressure off of our students. And I said, what I'd like to see is students consider not just how to help a student when they're considering suicide, but how about let's not push them to that point. And I think that kids can get overwhelmed with information, particularly in AP classes when there's boatloads of information. So now we're treating a high school student as a college student. And now we're saying, okay, now we're going to compression learning time. And I think that's just really difficult. And so as we move forward, I'd like you to consider that. And then also, I just would like to put a word in, we're not just looking at this increase, decrease in instructional time. I think some of the parents feel badly about how they might have been frightened. We're not looking at just the parents. We're looking at it as time spent with teachers. We have incredible teachers here, and we're so lucky. And I'm so pleased that my children have the opportunity to have those teachers not just as instructors, but as mentors. And I'd like to give them the time to do their jobs. So it's not a question of, that you have to look at that if you don't accept a shorter period, that you don't understand the science, or that you don't accept that this is a public health concern. I do. But I think we have something special here, and I really like to see us preserve that. And I hope as we go forward that we will. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Haley Iceworth, and on that is Carrie Stedman. Oh, Haley left? Okay, Carrie? Carrie's here. On deck is Christine Bosman.
Sorry.
I'll give one to him, I'll show it to him.
Hello, I'm Carrie Stegwick. I have a senior in high school and a freshman. So I'm just here, and thank you, Brian, for opening up the concept of other options that probably weren't presented by Input 220. And thank you, Joe, for talking about options that may go earlier than the 8:30 start time. So for all of you out there, I didn't bring enough handouts for the whole room, but basically what I'm doing now is talking about an option that Input 220 did not consider because it violated the sleep schedule, and that is option I. So you all have your hand out there of the different options that everybody, they looked at and the ones that they didn't. And option I, pretty much, starts the high school at 8 o'clock, ends it at 3:15, and the instructional time remains the same at 7 hours and 15 minutes. The middle school, of course, will remain the same start time that's been recommended, in all the other options, start at 8:50, end at 3:45. And then elementary schools, if we're going to follow the option, would start at 9:30 and end at 4:10, which I know is past the teacher contract, and that's kind of an issue. But obviously, all the instructional time remains the same. I know one of the main considerations that we all have regarding cost is the span of the bus times. And this particular option, it keeps the bus times an hour, 30 minutes between, the earliest and the latest start time. The cost on this one is the same as what they were calling option E on the sheet everyone has, but for your purposes, I think they're calling it the third option that's in the handouts. So that's like the extra $58,000, which Jeff Burnett clearly explained. The $58,000 really is going to go to the 0 hour that's going to be implemented if we pass the third suggestion by Info 220 folks. So it may not be an extra cost at all if we don't have to have a 0 hour and we can keep 8 periods. So it really may not be an extra cost. Why is this a good option? Well, we all know, unfortunately, it doesn't meet the state study. And because we're a unique district, 72 square mile unit school district, none of the options that any of us are going to present will be perfect. It does give the high school some extra sleep time, not as much as we'd all love to have the 8:30 start, but considering that may not be able to happen, at least it gives the high school a half an hour extra, maybe 40 minutes, which would be great. And it does allow the elementary schools to start later. I know it's a concern for their parents to have their kids get up early. It keeps the schedule the same in the sense the high school starts first, the middle school's in the middle, and elementary's at the end for child care purposes, for how everyone's lives have been forever and ever here. It doesn't mess with that either. It just bumps everybody back a little bit. Or should they start a little bit later. So for that reason, I really think that would be a great common sense option for you to consider going forward. And the reason why there's a modified option on there is only because I know that there's concern about the teacher contract in school and classes ending after 4 o'clock. So, let's see. I put an option there for the high school day to maybe shrink by just 10 minutes in order to bump all of, the high school start at 8. The end time for that would be 3:05. What we're really looking for there is an extra 10 minutes so the teachers in elementary can get out at 4 o'clock if that's going to be a big issue. Yes, it would shrink instructional time at high school by 10 minutes, but I really think we can find that in passing periods, maybe barring 1 minute for every class, but it would not at all affect the structure of the day, which is really important to a lot of people. And then that, of course, would allow the middle school to start at 8:40 instead of 8:50, get out 10 minutes earlier. The elementary could start at 9:20 instead of 9:30 and get out at 4 o'clock. So those are just some common sense options I thought I'd throw at you for you to consider. And I did have one question for Jeff Arnett. And Jeff, if you're still in the room, I know you had mentioned that the bus costs the same. I just want to make sure this is correct. That as long as there's an hour and 30 minutes in between the start time of the earliest school and the start time of the latest school, the bus cost is the same. I just want to, I don't know if Jeff can answer, he doesn't answer me right now.
Yeah, that is true.
Okay, the only reason why I say that is I even thought about doing middle school starting at 8 o'clock and high school starting at 8:50, but I thought it had to be high school and elementary span, which is why it is. Okay, so you can add that as an option as well, if you haven't already thought about it. So that's about it for my comments, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Foster is on his back, and on deck is Tasha Stonebreaker. I said that right?
Hello again. Well, I think the last two speakers stole most of my thunder. I would have to say ditto to both of them. I think that it's never been a question for people in the community that we would love for our children to have more sleep and to have the energy and everything that they can have to be better students and achieve more. That's kind of the stereotype of our district. We're a high drive district. And so I think the question of whether or not the kids should be able to sleep in and the high school should start later, to me is sort of a non-issue. The question for me is why it needs to start so late. And that I'm also pro Plan I. Because I feel like that allows us to make one change at a time. One of the things that I think was a problem for a lot of people that I spoke to was that we were not only talking about changing starting and ending times of the school day. And I think that's why a lot of people didn't get involved sooner in this process. Because the question was, well, do you want your kids to sleep later? Well, yeah, let's do that. But then we started hearing about block scheduling and blended learning. And there wasn't as much information out there about those things and the drastic change that could propose next year and the following year for our kids. And all along, I've been to a couple of the I-220 meetings, and I keep asking why. Why are we in such a hurry? Why do we need to make so many changes? And some of it is because the committee is very in favor of a shortened school day, and that creates certain problems with scheduling. And I think if we look at keeping our instructional time the same, yes, I'm one of those people that thinks that the instructional time is really important. I think that we can maintain a certain continuity of education that is really important, that isn't being addressed when we talk about flipping this thing there and that thing there. Let's let them adjust to one thing at a time, because not only are there effects on the things that we've identified, but there will be effects on things we haven't identified. Like, are all the teachers going to be able to continue to sponsor the activities or coach the activities that they have in the past? So will some move? Will some change? Will some be gone altogether because there isn't staff for those things to happen? And I appreciate everything that the committee has done, but we have talked about compromise, and I do think that one of the things that we need to compromise on, and I might amend Carrie's suggestion for option I, that instead of shortening the high school day, which is already challenging for the kids, for the AP kids, for band, for the fine arts, in any other alteration of the schedule, we could possibly shorten the elementary school day by 10 minutes and still be within our contractual obligation to the teachers. And my last point is, I really think that if we're talking about making any other changes besides start and end time, we must talk to the teachers. And I know that I'm hearing this nebulous teacher jargon, because it's scary that if they're in opposition to what somebody who's in charge of their job, they may not be able to enjoy the job the same way. So I would just like to speak to making sure that we have, because they're a huge deal, and that's part of the reason our kids are so successful. One of my daughter's classmates, who's a senior, is going to Harvard, and one from last year graduated early. He's at Stanford. I don't think we're doing it all that bad, but I don't think we need to scramble everything up and make huge, huge changes. Let's just talk about start and end times and take it slow, please.
So Tasha Stonebreaker, and on deck is Karen Weaver.
Hi, my name is Tasha Stonebreaker, and I've lived in Grafton 17 years. I'm a teacher. I'm not a teacher that we were just talking about. Except I don't teach in 220, I teach in 155. I teach high school history, I've taught remedial, I've taught regular, I've taught AP. And I can tell you now, when I heard cutting instruction time, oh, it'll take care of itself. The sleep will make up for it. That's madness. Take at least 6 minutes of my period. As teachers, we work extremely hard to create the magic, to create recreations, to do debates, to lecture interestingly, to get our kids at a 90% plus passing on the AP exams. And I can tell you now that if you pull 6 minutes every day, it's brutally painful. And I think as a teacher. Anyway, I fully believe in the science, I fully support the science, but I do not support cutting instructional time. Thank you.
Karen Weaver is at bed now, and on deck is Jeff Foster.
Hello, my name is Adriana Rico. I am sitting in for Karen Weaver.
Okay.
First of all, I'd like to say I'd like to thank everyone that was on the Input 220 committee. I know it was a lot of hard work. I know it was a lot of dams to go through, and I think it took a lot of time and effort for folks. And secondly, I originally was a very big proponent of a late start. I think the high school starting at 7:20 is ridiculous. These kids are getting up at 5 o'clock and standing in the dark to get a 5:15 bus, and it's hard. And I have 2 freshmen right now, and I see the negative side effect, the negative effect is starting that early. But even said that, I do have concerns with what is being proposed. I have 4 issues with the main proposal coming through, that came through the committee. First of all, the 9:30 start time, I think, is ridiculously late. Tonight in the presentation, there were many facts saying that 60% of all schools nationwide have a start time of 8 a.m. or later. But nowhere in the presentation did it say what percentage of schools have a start time of 9:30. I have a feeling if you looked at that information, very few schools are starting that late. From what I can tell, from what I looked at, it seems like the 8:15, 8:30, 8:40, that's what nationwide where high schools are starting and where they're going to with this sleep study analysis. So again, I believe in the sleep study. I do believe the high school should start later. I just do not agree with the late start time. I also think that this will cause a lot of issues for folks and students. You have kids who will be going to school from 9:30 to 3:49. And how about the kids who need to maybe babysit or need a job after school or need to have to sit and watch a swim meet or somewhere, and they'll be in school that late. My second concern is what everyone else has been saying, so I'm saying the same thing. I'm totally against cutting down on instructional time and teacher time. Those kids need the one-on-one, face-to-face with the teacher. I think the teachers here are great, and the more kids have exposure to the teachers, the better their education will be. You know, everyone says it's only 6 minutes. Well, 6 minutes comprises 12.2%. So if we're going to take our kids from a 49-minute class to a 43-minute class, we have just reduced their teacher time in every single class, every single day by over 12%. That's significant. A minute or 2, maybe we can live with. 6 minutes, way too long. And then I went through and looked at some of our neighboring school districts. I'm blind, any glasses. And I'm looking at what the average time per class or period time is. And we're looking here at Glenbard 48, Oak Park 48, Palatine 48, Downers Grove 50, Brave Lake 50, Hershey 50, Hinsdale 50, Lake Forest 50, Naperville 50, Riverside 50, Wakanda 50. And Stevenson, even though they just announced their change for next year, they are going to start at 8:30, and they did reduce their school day a little bit. Their class time is 47. So the 43 is pretty light compared to all the schools, some of the surrounding schools around here. And I know at the last meeting I was at, I was told that, well, there's a lot of really good schools that have 40 to 42-minute sessions. And what was noted was New Trier and Evanston. Well, I went and looked it up. They actually did change they did change their class time and shorten it years ago, but that was to add a ninth class. So if you look at the overall time of their day, it isn't short, it didn't get shortened. It's actually longer than what we are proposing. So I don't think we can make that analysis. I think that was very misleading and misrepresentative at the last meeting to say that. My third comment is, if I read the chart at the back of the room correctly from the last meeting, there isn't a 0-hour option of what is being proposed. What is being proposed is that the teachers will have an hour of professional development from 8:30 to 9:25 before school starts. Well, if the teachers are in professional development before school starts, and per contract they're out the door or coaching at 4 o'clock, when is that kid, when is that student supposed to go be able to have time to go talk to a teacher, ask a question, get help? My kids right now, they do go to school early, and if they need to, that's when they make an appointment to meet one-on-one one-on-one with their teacher if they have a question. Under this proposal, the children are getting a double whammy. They reduce the face-to-face time with the teacher, and then there's no time for them to actually discuss anything with their teacher if they have a problem. Now, I know kids have lunch periods, some kids do have free periods, but those don't necessarily line up between the student and the teachers. So I think this is a major disservice for all the students not to be able to have time to meet with the teacher if they have a problem in class. And my last concern is to the proposal that block scheduling is around the corner. Now, I know everyone said that this is outside of this committee, that was not Input 220's objective to look at, but from the presentations and from what we're hearing, that is also part of the overall plan. And I have a problem with that immensely. I've talked to several school districts, I've talked to a couple friends and some teachers who actually are in school districts with block scheduling, and pretty much out of 9 people I personally know, 1 was okay with it and the other 8 said they hated it. The comments that were brought up was students, especially freshmen and sophomores, don't have a maturity level for the expanded double session class time. Secondly, most students don't have the attention span to absorb it and or to retain the information that is presented in a longer session. Thirdly, sometimes the teachers just run out of steam. The last 15-20 minutes of those classes are either kids doing their homework by themselves, playing on their phones, or just phasing out. And then the comment, and then also that students were more limited in their electives. Just because of how the block scheduling worked, they weren't able to get as many classes in that they would have liked to as they did previously. So there's a lot of comments that at least I personally heard that's very negative on this, and this is one thing I'm hoping the school board will look at to eliminate the whole thing of block scheduling off the table. I think what the school board should be doing right now is addressing the start and ending time for each of the 3 schools in the district and call it a day. And if there is a need or a desire to go to block scheduling, I think that should be a whole new committee. I think that should be communicated with parents and teachers, and that should be tabled now and talked about later. And I personally was, strongly, I do not like that. I personally, as a mom of 2 high school kids, would not be happy with block scheduling at all. And I think I know a lot of other people that tend to agree. So those are my comments and my objections. And I, like everyone before me, had looked at all these proposals and do agree that the school time should be, the high school should start later. But I also agree that I would like to see the same options that Carrie talked about, looking at high school start about 8, not changing the amount of face-to-face time between the student and their teachers, letting the students have time before school to meet with their teachers in case they have a question. So kind of same as it is now, but just defer it. I call it the 30 and done. Just move everything back 30 minutes for each of the 3 schools. Hopefully it won't cost any more for busing. Doesn't change their teacher or student time. And hopefully then they'll get more sleep, maybe not as much as what the sleep studies would suggest. But as a parent, I think I can live with a 30-minute deviation from a study. I mean, a study is usually averages. And if it came down to less education for my child or living with a 30-minute deviation, I would live with a 30-minute deviation. Thank you.
Thank you. The last speaker signed up is Jeff Foster, and it'll be open mic.
Thank you. I am a freshman and senior in high school. Most of what's been said already covers what most of my notes say, so I've rewritten. But I think the bottom line is that I-220 has done a great job of looking into the problem of such an early start. They may have talked themselves into a full-time job because I think this isn't one solution. I don't think a radical bold solution by next year or the following year is the way to go. I think you should seriously take the suggestions about option I and push right away to start 20, 30 minutes earlier. That's one of the solutions Stevenson took. He really did originally have an 8 or 8 to 5 start time and add time to it. I think you need to take a long, hard look at open the book. It could be block scheduling, blended learning, whatever's on the table, I think has to be considered, but in a measured, in a very thought out time. I know that in the past there's been a lot of study with how you change education for the better. We looked at starting earlier in August. We looked at moving the first semester exams for the high school students before the holiday break, so they don't forget everything in 2 weeks that they're enjoying their time away from school. I don't think asking the district and the people in the district to change is the problem. I think it's a radical change that people aren't welcome to. I think there's also a suggestion that there's a lot of stuff that you don't know about that's on the table when you say, well, we're talking about more sleep. Everybody wants more sleep. I'll take 30 minutes more sleep next year if you're going to give it to me, so I'm all for that. I think the concern, my two biggest concerns always come back to eliminating instruction time, and whether you take a minute or two is one thing, but to eliminate a substantial amount of time for sleep suggests that the kids are magically going to go to sleep at the same time, and they're going to gain in their sleep time. You know, we still need to do some parenting. We still need to say, okay, it's time for you to go to sleep, turn it off, you know, and we have to help them learn how to do that themselves. They're not going to do it, but we can't just say, well, let's let the district take care of it. I don't think a transitional year where instruction time is taken away so that we can get the teachers up to speed, whether it's block scheduling or whatever, I don't think you can take that out. I think if you're going to think about a transition year of going to block scheduling, the cost to educate the faculty and staff to work in a block situation or whatever other methods, that has to be considered as an expense. I think that right now, if you take option on seriously or adding 20 or 30 minutes to the day, it's not going to be the attention-grabbing kind of a solution that you want, but it's inexpensive. The way I understand it, it could be even less expensive than the least expensive option 3 that was presented in that it's, as I understand it, $58,000 up the door. It's not $58,000 after the state gives us 70% back, because I don't know that the state's got 70% to give us back. Having said that, I think as long as there's transparency and there's an open door for everybody to say, here's what we're thinking about, take a month to think about it, come back to the next board meeting. I think it's much open discussion, whether it's with the actual 20 people, with other subcommittees, bring the high school in to present. Here's a schedule, here's the way we want it to change this for the better. Is a good thing, but the first thing has to be give the school, give the kids about 30 minutes more to work with, and let's see how that works. And that may reveal other opportunities and other options to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to have, here's what we're doing. We're kind of going to be in, we're going to ask people, there's 2 minutes left. I want as many people as possible. I'm trying to be really concise. It's okay to say, I agree with this comment that, if you get new to add, that would be good. So we'll ask you to be quick. Identify yourself too.
Yes. Hi, Melissa Buckley. I'm a member of the Input 220 committee. I'm also a parent of a Barrington High School graduate and a Barrington High School freshman. I've also lived in the community for close to 30 years. I'm a Barrington High School graduate myself. So I dealt with the 7:30 insane start time. But I wanted to just address, first of all, I agree with the committee recommendations completely. I'm not going to repeat any of that. Why I wanted to come up right now is just to address a couple of questions that I heard from the committee, and as well as comments made tonight that I felt I could clear up. First, somebody mentioned the idea that the 8 a.m. start times for elementary schools was simply just a logistical decision on our part based on busing and whatnot. And I want to make sure that the group, that you know that that wasn't the case. The 7:20 start time and the 7:30 start time at the high school historically, that was a logistical decision. We spent a lot of time talking about the elementary schools and when they should start. It was 8 a.m. too early. And I'm not the person that can give you all the reasons why. Nitin Sora gave a phenomenal presentation on children's sleep patterns and how he and ultimately the rest of our committee became comfortable with that. I think he is worth talking to at some point about that if you have questions or concerns about that. Second,
in terms, I think Joe asked about the 8 a.m., you know, like, did we look at that? And I think Carrie brought up option I, which we did consider and retire in our verbiage. There was another option also that kept the elementary schools at 9 o'clock, and that was retired because it was just, in our minds, cost prohibitive at about $1.75 million. So those were ideas that we did talk about, and I think they're definitely worth continuing that discussion on. Personally, I would be disappointed in an 8 o'clock start time because it only gives us, if you look at June's slide, if you lose us from an average of 7.1 hours of sleep for our teenagers to 7.6, which is still in the low end, in that low area. So that would be my concern. Finally, I think this is exactly where we should be in this process, which is the dialogue with you, the board, and the community as well. But I think that the questions and ideas and creative options that you all can help bring to this process is a great next step for our community. And I firmly believe that with your discerning questions, comments, ideas, and with our willingness to continue working on this, maybe we can get to a solution that is economically feasible, that is maybe more in line with our adolescent sleep needs, and creative in some way that we haven't thought of yet. So that's my hope, and I'm committed, and I know our committee is committed to continuing this conversation as long as it takes. Thank you.
So, Erica and then Christine?
Yes.
Yeah, and then anybody else who would like to speak, just line up there between Christine and that young man, and then that'll be our speaker line.
I'm Erica Shiner on the 220 committee specifically on transportation, and we are happy to speak to you guys next week more about transportation. One of the things I wanted everybody here to understand, obviously there's huge logistics in the district, and one of the things that hasn't been discussed is that high schoolers currently arrive at school at close to 6:40 is when the last bus has to pull out of the parking lot in order to make the 3-tier system work. So that 7:20 start is a little bit misleading based on traffic, based on the metro schedule of express trains, based on the flow of traffic through town, and the fact that if you drop high school students first, you've taken buses from all of the 72 outlying miles, you brought them all into the middle of town, and then you have to disperse them all back out. One of the reasons elementary school was listed as the first start in a lot of the scenarios is that the logistical arrangement works much better, that the dead-headed buses with drivers only spend that early morning time to go out into the 72 miles. They gather the children, they drop them still out in the community at all of the elementary schools. The buses are then pooled to pick up the next project case in those neighborhoods because they have dropped in those neighborhoods. So there is a logic with that transportation if we do the flip. If you put the high school at 8 o'clock, you don't gain as much in the benefits of less bus time and the logistics of having the buses, out in the periphery. Unfortunately, our middle schools, both and our high school, are all within 1.5 miles of each other in the most congested part of town. Logistically, if we can push that outside the window of express trains, I've met with traffic engineers, we know when the peak traffic is, the more we can do to push that outside of the middle of town at those times, the less time kids will sit on buses.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'll try to make this short. I'm Christine Bedard. I am a 15-year resident of the district. I have a 08 graduate. I also have a freshman in high school. I have one question for the board. I noticed in the survey questions, the respondents were never asked directly, how many hours of sleep does your child sleep on a weekend? Or on a weekend, for that matter. It was never asked, at least in the survey questions that were posted. What we have is details for respondents saying when you go to bed for middle schools and high schools, and when you wake up for middle schools and high schools, but we don't have the connection. So there is a gap there of 15 minutes, at least on one side, and 15 on another, that's a half an hour. And that is relevant information as to when you need to determine what our particular population is and what their sleep needs things are. So I would just ask that you guys look at that question. I'd also like to point out that a lot of the benchmark studies all had to do with schools that went up to 8:30. They were early starts from like 7 o'clock in the morning to 8:30. So their application beyond that time to 9 o'clock starts, 9:30, is where the research extrapolating that is of interest. But all that aside, that's really not the issue. I do want to point out though, we presented to you June 17, 2014, early elementary school start time research report. It's cited in our the Barrington United Education letter we sent you. The research has examined 718 public elementary schools in Kentucky, and what we found is that, and let me quote, the summary is, early elementary school start times are tough riding, advantaged children. And when you look at the study and you pull up the abstract and you look at the times that they looked at for those 718 schools, the elementary school started at 8 o'clock. And the high school started about what they're trying to push ours back to. So I think that you need to look at that. In essence, the proposals shift the burden of sleep from high schoolers, or a portion of them, because we don't know exactly how many, to the elementary school population as a whole. That's one point I want to make. This next point is on a personal level. I would like the board to understand what the issues are with some of the proposals now, which we all just found out about a week ago, and which we've all not had input into. You may have been looking at 9 o'clock start times for 18 months, but the public has not. And we have not been looking at 8, 9, or later with kind of instructional time and reduced class options and impact on the local community and businesses and extracurriculars. We've had a week, and I'm exhausted because I really dug into it. Okay, so I want you to understand, or I would ask you to understand, the proposals. I am a freshman. Junior year is obviously college crunch time. And here's the problem. Next year is the transition year according to the proposals by the high school. It's going to cut instructional time. That's bad enough. But it also cuts a period. It goes from 8 periods to 7. That's a lost opportunity and an option for a student to take certain classwork. Then next year, so the year my son is a junior year, needs to take significantly more advanced placement courses, prepare for SAT testing, prepare for SAT subject matter testing, or to compete at the top colleges. What he has to do, and I want to make sure I get this right, it's going to be all in. Their proposal has a reduction to 6 periods in block schedule, and that's what we were presented with, 6 periods. If you are an advanced placement kid that wants to apply for a top school, you need to take English, history, math, foreign language, and science is 2 periods. So that takes up all 6 periods of the day. If you want to take, if you're an athlete, you have to take a free period, the last period. So then you're pulled out. So you reduce even more your educational opportunities. You can't do athletics if you're going to meet the core curriculum requirements of college academics. You have to have those classes for 4 years. That's what they expect. Can't do athletics. You can't do band or fine arts. You don't have a period available. You can't do Project Lead the Way or anything else. It's not available to you. Offering a 0 hour then defeats the whole sleep purpose for most kids. And who's going to do band in the morning? I can't replace those options for my child. And this is going to hit his junior year. And besides that, the reduced academic time is going to mean less instruction and ability to prepare for the AP and the subject matter test. So I think that it's unfair to shift the burden from one population group to another, but I would ask you to seriously consider that. Please, as a board, advise the public that if you set start time, you will not be changing the structure of our curriculum without full public input. That hasn't happened with that week. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Powerful. I have to crunch down the hardest. I have to work the hardest if I want to get into the colleges I want. And it is going to be difficult with the shorter periods in the day to get all of that material. I have multiple classes that go bell to bell. My trigonometry class, my chemistry class. From the start of the period to the end of the period, it's information. And if you're reducing that class period by 6 minutes, there's 6 minutes of information every single hour of every single day. I go 8 straight, I don't have a lunch, I don't have a break. That's 48 minutes of this material. And teachers are presumably going to assign the material at home. That will give me more time at home to do work. And with the later start, I'll be going home later. It will be harder, it will push me back later, and I'll end up going to sleep later. And that may be what they want. That may be good because you can sleep in later. But what if there's so much homework on one night that you say, oh, I'll just do it in the morning. Well, you can't do it in the morning because that is when they tend to have you being asleep. I also want to point out that they say, oh, 6 minutes, it's not that big of a deal. I did a little bit of math while we were talking about 6 minutes. 6 minutes a period times 8 hours is 48, 8 periods is 48 minutes every day. 48 minutes times 5 days a week, assuming there's 5 days in every week, is 240 minutes every single week. And I mean, very generous, assuming there are 40 weeks in the school year, that's 9,600 minutes cut out of our school year. That's approximately 1,510 hours, or around 3 weeks of school cut out from our school year, just from 6 minutes period. And I feel like that 1,510 hours, that is 1,510 hours of material that I could have learned in class that I would now have to spend learning at home. Finally, I have a request. I feel like the survey that was taken, I believe it was a year ago, is a little outdated. Because when people first took the survey, they were excited with the concept of late start, students at least. I am the only student here. Parents and staff as well, but the students were very excited for the concept of late start. And they thought, oh, this is a great idea, and there were no downsides. There were no visible downsides on the survey. They were just mentioning all of the good things. And a lot of students whom I've asked a lot of people, hey, on a survey, did you answer honestly? And they're like, no, I answered the latest thing I could because I'm excited that I'm going to stop. I'm not lying, that's speaking the truth. And that, I feel, if a lot of students are going to do the same thing that I did, no lies, I did. I said 9:30 because that was the latest possible time. I was excited. Now that I realize that, it's not, it shortens the class periods. It does all of these negative things. So my request is, send another survey. Because, first of all, students are going to react very differently now that they have at least a slight idea of what's going on, of how much class time is going to be shortened, how much extracurricular curriculum is going to be changed. This new survey, it will bring a whole new light into the opinion of the school. And parents as well. Parents may have been excited or confused or not informed of the possible negative effects of this. So I implore you, send a second survey. Thank you. Okay, we've reached 10 o'clock. Are there three in line? Is that what I see, or is there 4? 3? Okay, those will be the final 3. Come on up. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Anissa. I want to say, I'm kind of more speaking for the elementary and middle school.
Because in 1 year, I will have a child in your elementary school, a child in your middle school, and a child in your high school. So if you go to the proposal currently of high school starting at 9:30, that means my elementary school child, after my high school or after sports, which will be around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the evening. He will not be getting to sleep in order to get up at 8 o'clock by 7:30 in the morning, because I'm going to be pulling him out of bed, drive to the high school to pick him up and bring him back home. And at the end of the day, it seems to boil down to 2 cups of coffee per family per month to get a better option in terms of transportation. I think all of us support 4 coffee houses in Barrington, I believe now, maybe 5. If I've all of us stopped buying $14 worth of coffee and put it towards the taxes to get the schools to start to do what in our buses, maybe we'd all be happy instead of a 9:30 start. I mean, yes, you throw out numbers of $1.28 million, but if you divide that across, I think there's maybe 5,000 families in Barrington, I'm not really sure, but it's probably close to that. You divide that across your 5,000 families, and you go with the most expensive option, that's $1,000 a year. Think about what you're saving, or what you're spending in order to get ideal times for your students, for your kids, across everything. $1,000 isn't a lot. I mean, I see kids walking through the middle school with the Lululemon pants and the Uggs, and not everybody can afford it, and so maybe we give a break or something. But at the end of the day, we can all live without 3 or 4 cups of coffee a month and get the transportation we need.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Harish. So I have a daughter going to second grade, and I have a 3-year-old, so I'm guessing you know where I'm going with this.
You don't get any sleep today.
So the day I saw this, when I first read about it, and thanks to Google, right, I had 2 hours to do a lot of research. But the first thing that I realized was the way we go about saving costs is not even the right way to do it, because you're basically just shifting costs from the school to the parents. So if I had an elementary kid that was coming back home at 4:10, and now she comes back at 3:10, then that basically means that I can put her in aftercare, most probably, because I can come back home, not in my wife. And if I ask my kid, when would she rather come back, would she rather come back 10 minutes earlier at 4 o'clock, school finishes early and comes back home, or she goes to aftercare? I'm pretty sure everyone knows what the answer is going to be. So I kind of would like to ask you people, so no offense, I don't mean to offend anyone over here. I believe everyone that was over here did a great job. I almost feel guilty to have spent just 2 hours on researching my stuff and critiquing someone who's been doing this work for one full year, right? But that said, what I've seen with studies is they mostly focus on middle school and high school. They basically don't do their work on the elementary school. And I heard stuff to the contrary, so I apologize if I said something wrong. What I also did do was I went and looked at all the other schools around, and all the elementary schools started 8:30 or late. None of the schools started 8 o'clock. From what I see, right? If we're doing this, and we know that we're doing it for the better of the kids, and I totally endorse the fact that we need to have a late start for high school kids, and probably even for middle school kids, let's do it right. Cost can be the only issue. And trust me, I've written all these things before those persons started writing, and so I'm saying a lot of things that people have already said. I know one of the high school kids over here said, send out a survey, and I endorse that as well. Send out another survey, because the first survey had no comments. It basically said, what do you think about the school timing? Does he get enough sleep? Yeah. And so I didn't even take the survey, right? I asked my wife to take the survey, and she said, yes, I took the survey. And the next thing we see is this, right? Now that we have a better context, why don't we send a better survey? Ask people the right questions. Not don't please send the survey. Ask the right questions.
Thank you. And you have the distinction of being our final speaker tonight. Good evening.
My name is Christine Stevens. I have a child in the middle school. She's her last year. She's going to the high school next year. And I also have
everybody who attended, especially everybody who stayed here till the end, thank all the speakers. I think this was a good kind of progress in conversation. I hope we continue to have conversations with the neighbors. We will pick this up next Tuesday about 7:30. We try to hope everyone can come back and join us for that part of the conversation. For now, we'll adjourn. Okay, yeah. So, we got the budget and we got the. Does anybody have any agenda items they want to?
I'm sure Jeff back over here.
Yeah, we have done the initial roundup. Those are not. When is the date? It's March what?
The initial kindergarten roundup has taken place. We have not had our Chinese immersion or our Spanish dual language meetings yet. Those are the last one in February. Applications are due by March 11th, and we hope to notify parents on the 1st of April, and then April have the enrollment.
So anything that's preliminary, and I want to make sure I have the dates right, you know, it wouldn't be accurate, so we won't know exactly.
There was a meeting, confidentiality,